Theirs was a romance bound together in faith between a church-going mother of 3.
Her face would light up when she speaks of him. She thought she found Mr. Right.
And a smooth-talking man of the cloth.
When Tracy preached, she was there just to be the complete support.
Until an act of unspeakable violence tore their love apart.
He found his wife dead on the driveway.
I felt like my world had come to an end. It was just so horrible.
Theirs was a romance bound together in faith. They uncover a multitude of sins and unquenchable sexual appetites that beg the question, was this a random act of violence or something far more wicked?
It was like watching an episode of Law & Order, All My Children. Everything rolled into one.
People have read stories about things like this. You just couldn't imagine that would happen.
(10:15 p.m., May 18th, 2010. Police in suburban Houston receive a frantic 911 call. The caller is identified as Tracy Burleson.
Can somebody say 911, please?
What's going on there? Why are the officers needed?
Somebody to shot my wife.
Officers are immediately dispatched to the Burleson home in the middle-class neighborhood of Greensbrook. Police find Tracy illuminated by the headlights of an idling vehicle, cradling a woman they assume is his wife.
You didn't see anybody, did you?
No, she's still warm, but she's not breathing.
Tracy is embracing her. He's hugging her when they arrive. So she's on the ground at that point.
Moments later, detectives arrive and quickly determine the woman is, in fact, Tracy Burleson's wife, Paulette. They also determine that Paulette has been shot in the back of the head. She is pronounced dead on the scene. While detectives on the scene try to calm Tracy, officers begin the grim task of notifying Paulette's next of kin.
I immediately headed there to her house to see her, Paulette, laying on the ground, on that cold ground. I felt like my world had come to an end.
Police cordon off the crime scene and ask Tracy, the crime's sole eyewitness, to retrace the events leading up to his wife's murder.
And me and my wife, we was out in the house, we came outside, we were talking and everything.
Still covered in his wife's blood, a shell-shocked Tracy tells them that the night started off just like any other.
What you want to do after this?
The couple shared a nice, quiet dinner. Afterwards, Tracy did the dishes while Paulette headed outside to take in the balmy night air. With Paulette enjoying the sunset, Tracy took the opportunity to make a run to a nearby Quickie Mart.
He'd actually purchased 2 items, a Baby Ruth and some corn chips.
And then when I came back, I pulled right there, and when I looked, I saw she was slumped over.
He found his wife dead on the driveway, apparently with a hole in her head and blood surrounding her body.
Tracy says he immediately called 911.
Somebody to shot my wife.
And as he waited for help to arrive, he held Paulette in his arms, saying prayer after prayer. Surveying the scene, officers realize Tracy's car is still running, and the driver's side door is wide open.
There was also a lawn chair that Paulette had been sitting in prior to her being shot.
Police can't help but wonder if Paulette is the victim of a drive-by, or perhaps some deadly home invasion. But they find nothing out of place. If this murder isn't some random act of violence, then who on earth would want a woman like Paulette Burleson dead? And why? Raised in Houston's historic Fifth Ward, Paulette Ross wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but she had big dreams and hoped to one day make something of herself.
We were poor, but we had a regular family, we survived. We grew up in a Baptist church. She was always active, reading the Bible.
After college, Paulette earned a nursing degree. But a hasty marriage in her mid-20s derailed her budding career.
It was an abusive marriage. Her second marriage was about 4 years later.
Paulette's failed marriages produced 2 children, but that didn't stop her from welcoming needy foster children into her home.
She was, just a great person to even consider taking those children in.
She had a good heart, for one thing. She was concerned and caring about other people.
And rather than being on the lookout for Mr. Right, Paulette sought out ways to strengthen her relationship with God, which led her to visit the First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church.
First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church was a pillar of the community. That church always helped the homeless. They helped the drug addicts with food from the food pantry and that sort of thing.
But the church's good works weren't all Paulette was drawn to. A young drummer in the church choir named Tracy Burleson also caught her eye.
I grew up in the church with Tracy at First New Mount Calvary Baptist Church. His stepfather is a deacon of the church.
Tracy aspired to one day be a minister, and at 27 years old, Tracy was 12 years Paulette's junior. But when the pair struck up a conversation, their love connection was instant.
Paulette was ecstatic about that. They fell in love with one another first sight. He would bring her flowers and candy. He was just a young gentleman.
Paulette was drawn in by Tracy's confidence and charm, but she was won over by the aspiring minister's sincere devotion to God.
Tracy Burleson seemed to be the knight in shining armor. And she was really happy and excited about being in love again.
What began as a giddy courtship soon blossomed into a mature romance. And after almost a year in each other's arms, Tracy and Paulette decided to tie the knot.
She's very happy, very, very happy.
Tracy became a stepfather to Paulette's 2 sons, John and Andre. Paulette, in turn, opened her arms to young William Fuller, Tracy's son from a previous relationship.
William reminded me of Tracy quite a bit. He was really laid back, but really sweet.
But William suffered from the life-threatening blood disease, sickle cell anemia.
He was partially blind at one point. He had bone infections. He had pneumonia. He had an enlarged heart. You name it, he suffered with it.
At the age of 12, William moved in with his father and Paulette and seemed to thrive under their roof.
We thought they were a great bunch of people.
Praise Him. Things begin to happen when you praise God.
But the blissful home life wasn't all the Burlesons had to be thankful for. Tracy rose through the ranks to become an ordained minister. And in 2008, he took the reins as a spiritual leader of the church.
He was called to minister. I just believed in what he was doing wholeheartedly.
God blesses you above, exceedingly above what you can imagine.
I was there when Tracy preached his first sermon. To see him up there was just delightful.
As the new First Lady of New Mount Calvary Baptist, Paulette was in the front row of the sanctuary every Sunday.
She was there just to be the complete support.
My sister Paulette loved him with all her heart.
But Reverend Burleson wasn't behind the pulpit long before disaster struck.
The main part of the church was burned down in a very mysterious fire.
And so you have a historic church in the city of Houston that is now gone.
Their church might have been gone, but Tracy and Paulette's faith was unshakable. And together they began the daunting task of rebuilding New Mount Calvary Baptist. But no sooner had construction on the new church begun than tragedy would strike again. And as a tearful Reverend Burleson tells police at the crime scene, the loss of his church and his beloved Paulette may be more than he can bear.
How awful it was that these 2 tragedies happened to this man in this shorter period of time.
And I say, Paulette, come on. I say, Paulette, come on. And that's when I grabbed her and I held her, then I kind of fell back from her.
But as they listen to Tracy, detectives realize he's more than just despondent about losing his wife and his church. He seems genuinely terrified.
Tracy said he was afraid that whoever shot Paulette might come back.
Is it possible that Reverend Burleson and his beloved wife are the targets of a church-related conspiracy? Before investigators can answer the question, they'll have to navigate a twisted path of lust and betrayal, the likes of which not even the most jaded homicide detective could fathom. Baptist minister Tracy Burleson seemed to have it all. A loving marriage to his soulmate Paulette Burleson, a rising career at the first New Mount Calvary Baptist Church, and the love and affection of his young son William Fuller. But less than 2 years after being named pastor, the Reverend's life has been ravaged by tragedy. First, his church burned to the ground, and now, just before midnight on May 18th, 2010, Tracy's beloved wife Paulette has been gunned down in cold blood. Soaked in Paulette's blood, Tracy recounts the discovery of his wife's body to responding officers.
And that's when the sheriff car came on through here.
Reverend Burleson seems terrified that whoever shot Paulette is coming back for him. Police ask him who he thinks the killer might be. His answer is shocking.
We had a lot of people at the church that wanted to do things too.
Tracy had this theory that perhaps the people who had been in charge of the church before Tracy arrived would want to hurt Tracy and Paulette somehow.
According to the Reverend, prior to being named pastor at New Mount Calvary Baptist, there was a heated battle between Tracy and another pastor over who should lead the flock.
Tracy Burleson's stepfather pulled strings and put him in that position to be the pastor of that church.
And not everyone was pleased that he had landed the job.
Tracy came and preached one Sunday, and the next thing the congregants knew, he was their new pastor.
Detectives at the scene are having a hard time believing anyone at a church as welcoming as New Mount Calvary would resort to violence in order to remove a pastor from the pulpit. That's when a young man arrives at the Burleson residence.
What's going on?
Like Tracy, he seems rattled by Paulette's death.
Officers at the scene were introduced to William Fuller as the stepson of Paulette, the son of Tracy Burleson.
William tells them he's been living with a full-time caregiver in a house a few miles down the road. Police ask William if he knows anyone who might want to harm his stepmother or his father. William offers up a theory similar to his dad's.
Yeah, but she's got a lot of enemies at the church.
William told them that there were other people at the church that would want Paulette dead and that they should be looking that direction.
The following morning, detectives pay a visit to New Mount Calvary Baptist Church.
Any disagreements? Anything
Oh,
like that
yeah.
going on?
Yeah.
In doing so, they quickly discover that Reverend Burleson's pastorship was even more controversial than he originally let on.
Many members did not want him to be the pastor of that church.
In speaking with parishioners, police also learned that as efforts to oust her husband mounted, Paulette grew increasingly hostile toward those who opposed him.
There were many arguments between her and several of the members in the church, and things would turn into shouting matches.
Is it possible this political infighting prompted a disgruntled parishioner or aspiring pastor to target Reverend Burleson and his wife for murder? And what about the mysterious fire that burnt the church to the ground just 1 week earlier? Did that have something to do with the murder too? Not according to several of the church's most respected members.
The oldest member of the church said that they set the church afire. And I said, who? She said, Tracy and Paulette. It was because of the insurance money.
The idea that Reverend Burleson burned down his own church for insurance money adds yet another layer of mystery to the case.
He's just a sneaky guy.
When investigators press church members for a possible motive, They explain it all has to do with the fact that Reverend Burleson didn't practice what he preached, especially the part about not coveting thy neighbor's wife.
Tracy Burleson was after one thing, and that was to sleep with as many women as he possibly could.
Apparently, Reverend Burleson wasn't the devoted husband he claimed to be. Detectives know extramarital affairs are one of the primary motives for murder. But unless these accusations can be proven, they won't bring them any closer to solving the crime. But as investigators dig deeper, they uncover sordid secrets that cast Reverend Tracy Burleson in a shocking new light and put them hot on the heels of a seductive plot that brings the Burlesons' idyllic romance to a sudden and violent end. It's been less than 24 hours since the First Lady of Houston's New Mount Calvary Baptist Church, Paulette Burleson, was gunned down in the driveway of her suburban home and left to die in her husband's arms.
No one deserves to be murdered in the manner in which Pauletta was murdered.
But the investigation has already taken a bizarre turn. Paulette's husband of 15 years, Reverend Tracy Burleson, and his son, William Fuller, believe bad seeds within his congregation are behind the crime. But several disgruntled parishioners have accused the Reverend of not only burning down the church for insurance money, but are convinced his numerous alleged affairs are the motive behind his wife's murder.
Tracy was a womanizer.
Tracy and Paulette had started having problems 2 years after they were married. He was a dirty, low-down dog.
And that's not all. Tracy's infidelities weren't limited to only women.
She caught him with men in the church. She caught him with transvestites in the church.
So, he went both ways. Paulette was overwhelmed about it because she didn't want to believe it, but she knew she'd seen it.
It's the kind of sin that would make even Jimmy Swaggart blush. But given all the bad blood between Reverend Burleson and some of his parishioners, investigators aren't sure what to make of these allegations of infidelity. They turn to Tracy and Paulette's neighbors in suburban Houston, hoping they might shed some light on the couple's relationship. It doesn't take long for them to find a new lead. According to one of the Burlesons' neighbors, on the morning of the murder, he saw the Reverend and his wife arguing in their driveway.
He had seen Paulette and Tracy and a woman arguing earlier in the day.
Detectives pressed the neighbor for a description of this mystery woman. All he knows is that she was African American.
No one knew who the third party involved in the argument earlier in the day was.
Could this mystery woman be responsible for Paulette's death? If so, what was her relationship with the Burlesons? Given the tawdry accusations already being lobbed at Reverend Burleson, detectives aren't sure he'll give them a straight answer on the subject. Instead, they reach out to his son, William.
He was briefly questioned and said that he didn't know anything about the third party involved in the argument.
Hey, we need to ask you a few more questions.
William seems nervous, which suggests he's hiding something. Detectives ask William if they can speak with his caregiver. Moments later, a young woman comes to the door. She tells them her name is Tyone Palmer. Tyone explains that she met William Fuller through a mutual friend, and ever since William moved out of his parents' house, she's also doubled as his live-in caregiver.
She was like a mother to him.
She helped with his sickle cell. She took care of him while he was in the hospital.
Tyone says she was with William the night Paulette was shot. She also corroborates William's claim that she gave him a ride to the crime scene long after the murder was committed.
She was very credible.
Tyone Palmer's statement seems to rule out William Fuller as a possible suspect. Now detectives aren't sure whether they should be looking at Reverend Burleson, or at one of his parishioners, or that mystery woman neighbors saw arguing with the Burlesons the morning of the murder. It's at that very moment that detectives get the break they need, though by no means is it the one they've been expecting.
Sheriff's deputies received information from a confidant of William Fuller.
Someone needs to know it. Someone needs to take care of this and put him away.
Saying that William Fuller had confessed to her that he had been the one who shot and killed Paulette.
Investigators are perplexed. By all accounts, Tracy's son William is a caring, kind-hearted young man.
Officers asked her to phone William Fuller and see if, in fact, he would again confess as they recorded that conversation.
Sheriff's deputies set up a wiretap with William's confidant, hoping William will once again reveal himself as Paulette's killer. But none of them are prepared for the gruesome story William is about to tell, one that culminates in the ultimate act of betrayal. It's been almost 3 weeks since police in suburban Houston discovered the dead body of Paulette Burleson, the loyal and loving wife of Reverend Tracy Burleson and First Lady of New Mount Calvary Baptist Church. Sheriff's deputies have received an anonymous tip from someone claiming that Paulette Burleson's own stepson, William Fuller, is responsible for her murder. In order to get this alleged confession on tape, detectives have asked the informant to give William a call on which they've set up a wiretap. In this call, William again confesses to killing his stepmom.
I did it, I did it. I don't know what to do.
I would have never thought William would have been involved in that situation.
But William's confession pales in comparison to what he says next.
William Fuller confessed to her that he had killed Paulette at his dad's request.
I can't believe I did this, man.
William tells the informant it all started in late 2009. William had recently moved in with his caretaker, Tyrone Palmer. That December, William took Tyrone to Family Day at his dad's church.
He considered Tyrone family. He invited her to attend with him for Family Day. William simply introduced Tyrone to his dad.
But according to William, soon after, Tracy asked him to deliver a message to Tyrone.
The note is telling her that he's interested in her and he'd like to get to know her better. Her initial reaction was surprise because she was under the impression he was married and everything was going well.
Tracy asked Tyrone if they could meet face to face so he could better explain his situation. A few days later, Tracy and Tyrone had their first rendezvous.
He leads her to believe that he is going through a divorce, it's going to be final, and that he is basically available to have a relationship with her.
According to William Fuller, his dad convinced Tyrone there was nothing sinful about his intentions and that the two of them should start dating.
Tyrone Palmer was ripe for the picking in the sense that she was vulnerable. She's working long hours. She's caring for William. She's not receiving a lot of male attention. He stepped in and swept her off her feet.
With police still listening in, William Fuller explains that just before Christmas, his dad decided to take his relationship with Tyrone to the next level and ask for Tyrone's hand in marriage.
It was a big surprise. Tracy is still married to Paulette.
Nevertheless, William claims Tyrone accepted his dad's proposal, still believing the Reverend had every intention of divorcing Paulette. But William also tells the informant his stepmom would fight such a divorce tooth and nail. Her religious beliefs, coupled with her own previous bad marriages, had convinced her that divorce was a sin.
She was not going to divorce, so it was quite evident that she had to go away.
According to William Fuller, that's when his father came to him with a proposition. If William would murder his own stepmom, Tracy would be free to marry Tyone and collect a $60,000 life insurance policy, from which William would receive a hefty cut.
He didn't want to kill her, but Tracy kept badgering him, and I think he had just had enough. He snapped.
Investigators have heard all they need to hear. As soon as the call is over, they head to the DA's office and file murder charges against William Fuller.
The district attorney's office believed there was probable cause to charge him with the capital murder of Paulette Burleson. William Fuller was arrested and taken down to the police station and was interrogated.
But detectives know they're going to need a more detailed confession in order to charge William's father or his live-in caregiver with murder. They press William to fill in the gaps. In a matter of minutes, he comes clean, spilling all the details about that fateful night. On the night of May 18, 2010, William receives a phone call from his father, who tells him tonight is the night. Tracy also explains that Tyone is going to serve as the accomplice providing transportation and, more importantly, the murder weapon.
His dad had contacted him. He got the gun from Tyone Palmer's bedside drawer.
According to William, Tyone then drives him to his parents' house. As William approaches, his father distracts Paulette by instigating an argument.
Tracy Burleson and Paulette Burleson were arguing loudly, and that was his cover, or his ability to sneak up behind Paulette and shoot her without being seen by her.
He put the gun to her head and he shot. And Pauletta fell in the driveway and William ran.
After fleeing the scene, William hooks back up with Tyone at an intersection 2 blocks away. Tyone then drives William to his friend's house in South Houston, but not before stopping to let William toss the murder weapon off a bridge into Green's Bayou.
Somebody said 911, please.
According to William, while all this is taking place, his father Tracy calls 911, explaining that his wife has been shot. Tracy then stages his car to make it seem like he's just returned home and discovered Paulette's body. It's a chilling confession that seals William's fate. He's booked on capital murder charges. Detectives also take a quick trip to South Houston and the bridge where William Fuller claims he disposed of the murder weapon.
What he wanted to do was toss it into a bayou, but it did not end up landing in the water. It landed on the side of a bayou, and the gun was recovered.
Once the murder weapon is in their possession, detectives run a background check on it. They learn the gun is indeed owned by Tyone Palmer. Not only does this seem to corroborate William Fuller's confession, it gives the DA's office the ammunition they need to charge both Tracy Burleson and Tyone Palmer with murder. But William Fuller isn't quite finished confessing. He's about to reveal one final, tawdry secret, one that turns the stomach of everyone involved in the case.
People have read stories about things like this. You just couldn't imagine that would happen.
I was livid and I was sick, and you don't cross those lines.
They met so innocently in the church they would one day run together. But when Paulette Ross fell deeply in love with Tracy Burleson, she could never have known that 15 years later, Tracy's son would take her life, and allegedly do so at his father's request. Armed with a murder weapon and a wiretapped confession from the triggerman William Fuller, who has been arrested on capital murder charges, investigators believe they're ready to charge the Reverend Tracy Burleson with capital murder as well. They also plan to pin evidence tampering charges on William's live-in caregiver, Tyone Palmer, who has been having an affair with the Reverend.
We were shocked. We were very shocked because this was something new and it was disturbing. We did not expect that at all.
But before investigators can make these arrests, William Fuller reveals one final shocking detail about the crime.
It turns out that there was a sexual relationship between Tyrone Palmer and William Fuller after the killing.
William told the police the sexual part of that relationship didn't start until after he'd killed Paulette. He had sex with Tyrone Palmer as a reward from her for killing Paulette.
When I discovered that Tyrone had gone to bed with not just Tracy, but William as well, I was livid and I was sick. You don't cross those lines.
You just would never expect that a father would hire a son to kill his wife so that the father could continue an inappropriate relationship with a woman who then winds up having a relationship with the son while they're all involved at a church.
Sordid details aside, investigators have more than enough probable cause to arrest both Reverend Burleson and Tyrone Palmer. With William already in custody, police and U.S. Marshals descend on the house Tyrone Palmer shares with Tracy Burleson's son, William Fuller. They find Tyrone in her bedroom, in bed with the Reverend.
Get on the ground! Get your hands up! Get your hands up! Get on the bed! I didn't do nothing.
But even as he and Tyrone are taken into custody, Reverend Tracy Burleson maintains his innocence.
This was a bizarre love triangle with many different players in it. The fact that Tracy Burleson was a pastor in a church made it all the more sensational.
Once in custody, detectives focus their attention on Reverend Burleson, pressing him to admit his involvement.
I want to talk to my lawyer. That's it. I don't want to talk to you or anybody else. I want to talk to my lawyer.
So detectives turn to Tyrone Palmer. Tyrone claims she knows nothing about the murder.
I don't even know why you arrested me.
At least not until after it happened.
Tyrone Palmer told police that after the shooting, she picked up William. William admitted to her what happened.
But I had nothing to do with it.
Detectives aren't buying it. They decide to ratchet up the charges against Tyrone.
The decision was made to charge her with capital murder.
This means all three suspects, Tracy, Tyrone, and William Fuller, have all been charged with capital murder, a more serious charge that carries steeper penalties. If convicted, they face life in prison or worse.
There are only two punishments available for capital murder: life in prison without the possibility of parole and the death penalty.
Terrified by the possibility of a death sentence, William Fuller cuts a deal.
William Fuller's attorney approached me as a representative of the state and informed me that Mr. Fuller wanted to cooperate in the prosecution of Tracy Burleson and Tyrone Palmer.
In exchange for a 20-year prison sentence, William agrees to testify against both his father and his live-in caregiver. Prosecutors decide to try Tracy and Tyrone separately. On September 26, 2011, the state of Texas versus the Reverend Tracy Burleson gets underway. The courtroom is packed with Paulette's grieving family, as well as scores of parishioners from First New Mount Calvary Baptist, some of whom support Tracy, others want to see him fry.
I've been prosecuting for 25 years, and I have never been involved or seen a case like this with the different players involved in it. It was, at best, bizarre. It was almost a voyeuristic atmosphere. They wanted to hear about the sex and the violence and stuff.
Prosecutors opened their case by asserting that Reverend Burleson was the crime's mastermind, that he manipulated his son, William Fuller, into murdering his own stepmother. To hammer home their point, prosecutors show the jury crime scene photo after gruesome crime scene photo.
I was sitting with some of Pauletta's relatives in the courtroom. We were taken aback. It was just so, it was horrible. I looked over at Tracy. He showed no emotion. no emotion at all.
After rolling out the ghastly crime scene photos, prosecutors called their star witness, William Fuller, to the stand.
Testifying against my father, that's like the toughest time in my whole life. And I remember the DA asked me, like, do you love your father? And I told her, like, and I love him. I would be lying if I said, like, I didn't love him.
But William also tells the court that his love for his father was never reciprocated. Rather than being the kind, loving father he dreamed about as a kid, his dad was physically and verbally abusive. After recounting the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, William details how recently Tracy, and to a lesser degree Tyone, had been pressuring him to kill his stepmom.
My dad and Tyone planned the murder. I carried it out. The only part I played was shooting Paulette. Everything else was basically let them drive. Like, I'm just a passenger.
It's clear that William Fuller's testimony resonates with the jury.
He was very cool, very calm, very deliberate in answering his questions.
But when the defense cross-examines William, he begins to unravel.
He became very agitated in the court, and he started to burst out in anger.
And it's in this moment of anger that William Fuller lets slip a crucial detail, one that reveals another possible motive for murder, one that nobody in the courtroom saw coming, one that could make Reverend Tracy Burleson a free man. In the trial of Reverend Tracy Burleson for the murder of his wife, Paulette, Tracy's son, 20-year-old William Fuller, has given testimony that seems to have cemented the fact that his father was engaged in a torrid affair with William's caregiver, Tyone Palmer, and that they were the real masterminds behind Paulette's murder. That is, until defense attorneys launch into a withering cross-examination of William and elicit a stunning admission.
William said on cross-examination how much he hated Paulette, that he was glad he killed her, and that given the chance, he would kill her again.
William goes on to say that Paulette physically and mentally abused him frequently throughout his childhood. He also states that Paulette didn't play favorites. She mistreated her stepson, her foster children, and her biological kids in equal measure.
He talked about their upbringing and how he and his siblings were turned out into the backyard in the rain and the cold weather and the heat, almost like feral children.
I messed up. I let my emotions get to me, but I had been holding them in so long. But why wouldn't I want her dead? You know what I mean? She did not give a damn about us. We literally used to hate her, like sit up at night and cry and just wish that she would fall dead.
Not surprisingly, Tracy's defense team seizes on William's shocking admission as evidence that Tracy had nothing to do with Paulette's death.
Our defense was that William finally got fed up, couldn't take it from Paulette anymore, and finally just killed her.
Prosecutors counter by pointing out the glaring holes in Reverend Burleson's alibi. Tracy said he discovered Paulette's body after returning from a nearby convenience store. But prosecutors reveal the store was closed at the time Tracy claimed to have been there. They also hammer away at the pastor's now infamous sexual appetite and his heated affair with Tyone Palmer, which would give him a legitimate motive to get rid of his wife. On September 29, 2011, both sides rest their case. Less than 5 hours later, the jury returns with a verdict.
The judge reads the verdict, says, we, the jury, hereby find Tracy Burleson guilty of, and the judge says, capital murder.
As soon as the verdict was read, the courtroom was filled with so much joy. There were many thank you, Jesus, in the courtroom. The jury knew that Tracy didn't actually pull the trigger, but they knew that he was 100% behind it.
Tracy Burleson is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
I didn't want Tracy Burleson to get the death penalty. I want him to live and suffer for what he have made us suffer with.
With Tracy behind bars, prosecutors turned their attention to Tyrone Palmer. Between William Fuller's confession and the fact that the murder weapon belonged to Tyrone, the jury has no trouble convicting her of murder.
Her goose was cooked.
But in a shocking twist, Tyrone isn't convicted of capital murder, but a lesser charge of first-degree murder, which means Tyrone will serve a mere 7 years behind bars. Paulette's family is outraged.
Tyrone Palmer is a low-down dirty. She's the scum of the earth. I hope she rot in hell.
For his cooperation with authorities, Tracy Burleson's son, William Fuller, receives a reduced sentence of 20 years in prison. Despite what they perceive as Tyrone's slap on the wrist, those closest to the case are confident the true ringleader behind the sick and twisted crime got the punishment he deserved.
I believe in this case justice was done. Tracy Burleson was the most culpable, and he is doing the most time, and so that's very appropriate, and that is just.
Maybe so, but the verdict doesn't change the fact that amidst all the sordid details and jaw-dropping allegations, the tawdry tales of sex and lies and dirty church politics, the life of an innocent wife and mother was cut short by those closest to her.
Tracy couldn't get rid of her to just walk away from her because she wouldn't allow that. So he felt like that this was the only way that I can actually get rid of her for good.
The thing I miss most about my sister is her smile. I missed it a great deal.
It was Saturday morning, the 11th of March, in the year 2017, within the serene, yet often deceptively tranquil, embrace of Georgetown, South Carolina. The Black River, a ribbon of dark water winding through the landscape, held its secrets close, as it always had. On this particular morning, a local resident, a man devoted to the peaceful solitude of fishing, cast his line into those very waters. His movements were habitual, his gaze usually fixed on the gentle dance of his float or the distant flight of a heron. But this day, his attention was drawn by something, an anomaly in the rhythmic sway of the currents. He noticed something in the water that did not look right to him. This was a body floating lifelessly in the Black River. My career, a long and often challenging journey, was spent closing murder cases. Each one was a labyrinth of human failing, a stark confrontation with the darker side of our nature, and a relentless pursuit of truth. Yet, I am but one among a rare breed, those who answer the urgent, disquieting call to unravel the unsolvable, to pursue and apprehend a ruthless killer, to find justice for the silent victims. It takes a certain resolve, an unyielding dedication, and an acute understanding of both logic and human psychology. That, truly, is what it takes to be an American detective. On this particular day, in Georgetown, South Carolina, a man who embodies the spirit of unrelenting investigation was about to embark on his very first murder case. His name is Investigator Alan Maurice. Now, a question often arises, particularly from those not intimately familiar with the nuanced classifications within law enforcement. How come down here they call an investigator instead of a detective? Investigator Maurice himself, with a touch of practical wisdom born of his varied duties, offers a straightforward explanation. I guess because we're general investigators, he states. His role, as he elaborates, is broad, encompassing an expansive spectrum of criminal activity. I work everything from fraud cases, burglaries, bank robberies, pretty much anything and everything. It is a testament to the dynamic and often unpredictable nature of police work in smaller jurisdictions, where specialized units might be less numerous, requiring officers to possess a versatile skill set. We might get a call out. You just never know. It could be a normal day, but a normal day can turn to a busy day really quick. This reflects the perpetual readiness required, the understanding that tranquility can abruptly transform into urgency. It is not merely a job, but an intrinsic part of one's very existence, particularly when confronting the stark reality of violent crime. A body, tragically, had been discovered in a county jurisdiction. The Black River, despite its appearance of ancient calm, had surrendered its grim secret to the harsh light of a March day. Consequently, the sheriff's office responded, initiating the protocols for law enforcement to attend to the scene. The call reached investigator Maurice and his colleagues around 1:30 that afternoon. The discovery had already been made, the preliminary assessment of an unnatural death almost certainly conveyed by the reporting officer. It was not a straightforward retrieval. The very nature of a water recovery presented its own challenges, both physical and psychological. Law enforcement officers had to actually physically grab hold of the individual by clothing and just ease him back to shore. The act itself, a solemn recovery, highlights the inherent respect given to the deceased, even in the most tragic of circumstances. The initial assessment, for any seasoned officer, invariably begins with the fundamental question: was this somebody that had perhaps fallen in the water or out of a boat? However, as the individual was brought closer to the bank, the preliminary hypothesis of an accident quickly dissolved into a far more sinister realization. But when they brought him to shore, it was immediately evident to me that he had not fallen in the water accidentally. The immediate visual clues, stark and undeniable, painted a different picture altogether. His wrist and his ankles were bound with speaker wire. The casual nature of the material, everyday speaker wire, belied the horrifying intent behind its use. This discovery, raw and unambiguous, delivered a chilling clarity. That to me was a clear indication that he had been the victim of homicide. The moment a victim is found floating in water, the already complex machinery of a homicide investigation takes on an additional, immensely challenging layer of difficulty. When your victim is found floating in the water, it enormously complicates the case. Investigator Maurice emphasizes, and from a forensic and investigative perspective, this is a profound understatement. Identifying the precise cause of death becomes a daunting task. They can't tell the cause of death looking at the remains because they're in such poor condition. This immediate impediment, the inability to discern how a life was ended by mere visual inspection, throws the initial investigative steps into a fog of uncertainty. Adding to these intrinsic challenges were the specific environmental factors of the American South. Here, the elements in the South can be tricky, even in February and March. While one might associate these months with cooler temperatures, the reality can vary wildly. Even moderate warmth can significantly influence biological processes. The water plays a factor, and the decomposition, and the speed. The sheer degradation of the remains presented an immediate and distressing obstacle to identification. The face is unrecognizable. This simple, yet profoundly disturbing, fact meant that positive identification was not made at that point. The deceased was, for the moment, merely a victim, stripped of their individuality by the cruel hand of violence and the indifferent currents of the river. Yet, despite the anonymity imposed by the water, a flicker of recognition, a nascent connection, stirred within Investigator Morris's mind. He was thinking back, not to an active case, but to a recent report, a detail that resonated with this grim discovery. Just because we had already been investigating a missing person, he recalls, the memory brings with it a specific individual and a familiar name. I remember Ms. Brittany Green came in to report a missing person. Her story had left an impression, painting a picture of a life that had inexplicably vanished. She had explained the situation with clarity and concern. She says his name is Leon Harrison, Jr., but everybody calls him Jr., and more intimately, he is the father of her 2 children. The emotional weight of the missing persons report stemmed from a rupture in a deeply ingrained routine. They no longer live together, but he routinely calls her every night to speak to the children. He hasn't called in 2 weeks. This unwavering pattern, this daily ritual of a father connecting with his children, suddenly broken for 14 long days, had rightly raised red flags. It's an unspoken truth in investigations of missing adults. When established routines, particularly those anchored by familial responsibilities, abruptly cease without explanation, the possibility of foul play dramatically escalates. A guy that has family, that has loved ones, that has children, they're not just going to banish off this earth. This sentiment encapsulates a core tenet of human behavior. People with strong connections do not simply evaporate. Brittany had provided critical descriptive details about the missing man to the police. Brittany explains to police that Mr. Harrison is 32 years old. This identifying tattoo stood out as a beacon of potential clarity, amidst the ambiguity of the river's victim. Now, Investigator Maurice was grappling with a pivotal question. Maurice is trying to determine if this body that was found in the river is, in fact, his missing person. The answer to that question would fundamentally alter the trajectory of two investigations, fusing them into a single, terrifying narrative of murder. For investigator Maurice, this developing situation represented a significant and unforeseen challenge, both professionally and personally. Investigator Maurice generally works property crimes. His usual domain involved a methodical unraveling of burglaries, frauds, and other offenses against possessions, rather than person. This kind of work, while typically did not involve the direct confrontation with extreme human violence and the deeply unsettling psychology of a killer. If this is, in fact, a homicide, it will be his very first. The weight of this distinction hung heavy. A first homicide case is not merely a professional milestone, it is a trial by fire, a transformative experience that demands an entirely new level of focus, resilience, and emotional fortitude. The stakes are profoundly higher, the human cost immeasurable. To begin to piece together the victim's last moments, and to potentially identify a cause of death, the body had to be sent for autopsy. This medical examination is a critical juncture in any death investigation, but especially so in suspected homicides, where evidence might be degraded. For Maurice, it was more than just a procedural step. It was my first autopsy. So, yeah, it was a nerve-wracking thing. His candid admission speaks to the visceral impact of confronting mortality and brutality in such a stark clinical setting. The experience of a first autopsy leaves an indelible mark. I recall my first autopsy very well. The stark reality of it, the chilling silence, the methodical steps that peel back layers of tragedy. After he had been to several hundred of them, you tend not to pay attention to the details in the same way. The sheer number of examinations creating a certain a professional detachment necessary for the job. But the first one is a shock, a profound and unforgettable initiation into the raw realities of criminal investigation. Maurice recounts his immediate impressions, underscoring the severity of the victim's state. That had been the first time that I had actually seen him, because I wasn't there during a retreat, referring to the initial recovery from the river. The visual impact was undeniable. That's the most uncivilized way that I could ever see a person going out of this world. It's a testament to the fundamental human aversion to such deliberate, debasing violence, a feeling that fuels the relentless pursuit of justice. The medical examiner, a crucial figure in the investigation, provided their expert findings. The advanced state of decomposition, as anticipated, posed significant challenges to determining a precise cause of death. The medical examiner explains to Maurice that although he cannot determine the cause of death, because of the decomposition level is so great, he can rule it as a homicide based on the bindings. This distinction is critical. While a specific fatal blow might be obscured, the incontrovertible presence of restraint points undeniably to they're not enough to cause internal damage either. The nature of these wounds, seemingly inflicted but not life-ending, added another layer of grim intrigue. It's hard to say what those were with the condition of the body, due to the presence of animals, and that sort of thing in the water. The environment, as always, complicated the narrative, introducing factors that could mimic or obscure other injuries. One natural predator specific to the region immediately came to mind. There are also alligators in this river, but they prefer living things. This biological insight is important. Normally, they like a live target that they can kill and then eat. This often rules out significant post-mortem predation by alligators, unless the body has been extensively submerged and softened, making it more appealing. Despite the challenges, the medical examiner offered an educated opinion, a hypothesis based on years of experience with trauma cases. The medical examiner offers an opinion that perhaps a beating was involved that caused the death of unforced trauma, but he can't even really say that. He just doesn't know. This level of uncertainty, while frustrating, is a hallmark of diligent forensic science. Without clear evidence, speculation must be qualified, reinforcing the profound complications posed by the water. The water's pervasive impact extended beyond the immediate cause of death, directly compromising the availability of crucial identifying evidence. When your victim has obviously been in the water for an extended period of time, there is no way DNA trace is going to survive or fingerprints survive. These cornerstone forensic tools, so often pivotal in solving cases, were rendered useless. The aquatic environment systematically washes away or degrades organic material and delicate dermal ridge pattern, severing vital links to a perpetrator. so you're not going to find something that identifies somebody responsible for this. This acknowledgement underlines the sheer investigative challenge. Yet, amidst these significant limitations, the autopsy yielded one profoundly significant finding. The findings of the autopsy were relatively useless, with one major exception. It was the physical identifier that Brittany Green had provided, now confirmed in the most tragic way. The presence of a rose tattoo on the right arm identifies this body as that of Leon Harrison Jr., also known as Jr. With this confirmation, the missing persons case closed its chapter, only to reopen immediately as something far more chilling. The case of missing person is now retitled homicide. The shift was abrupt, definitive, and profoundly impactful. It speaks to the rapid transformation of perspective, the accelerated baptism by fire that accompanies the profound weight of a murder investigation. For investigator Maurice, this transition was now his reality. Maurice is nervous. He's worried. He's all the right things. These are, indeed, the right things for an investigator tasked with solving the ultimate crime. His immediate course of action was clear. Learn everything possible about the victim, Leon Harrison Jr., who was this man whose life had been so violently extinguished. So he begins by inquiring about the victim. The key to understanding any murder often lies in understanding the victim's life, their relationships, their joys, and their conflicts. Ms. Brittany Green, having reported J.R. missing, was the natural first point of contact, offering insights into his character and his role as a father. Ms. Brittany Green was brought in. He gave us some information about him and what he was like as a father. Brittany painted a vibrant picture of J.R., bringing him to life in the somber interrogation room. Leon. He was a funny, outgoing person. Big personality. Her words created a sketch of a man who radiated warmth and levity. Loved to smile, tell jokes, loving, caring father. And a particularly cherished memory of athletic triumph. My first day playing football, and I remember running my first touchdown. He was running down the side like, "Oh, go, go." The image of JR's ecstatic embrace was palpable. He met me in an end zone. He was going crazy. These vignettes of paternal love reinforced the senselessness of his death. Brittany Green reiterated the consistent bond JR maintained with his children, a detail that now carried immense significance. Brittany Green said he always was connected to those two kids, and he called them every night. He would always come and check on his children. His disappearance, therefore, was not merely an absence but a violent tearing away from these essential routines. The investigators, their pens poised, then delved into more complex, potentially problematic aspects of JR's life. Brittany's response narrowed the focus to a specific, emotionally charged relationship. The only thing she says is that he has an estranged wife, and her name is Taish. This detail immediately flagged Taish. Brittany provided context to this marital separation, sketching the timeline of their relationship's deterioration. I learned that Taish probably like July of 2015. I got married, I believe, September. It suggests a rapid progression from meeting to marriage, sometimes a precursor to foundational instability. She says he'd been married for a while, but they recently broke up, and he moved out. The recentness of the separation, coupled with the routine-breaking disappearance, creates a logical nexus for inquiry. Brittany also shared JR's personal feelings about the situation. He used to call me and talk to me about things that was going on in the relationship. He wasn't happy. A man unhappy in his marriage, recently separated, now found dead in a river. So he suddenly appeared to have a dead man with recent marital troubles of some kind. This is a classic starting point in many homicide investigations. That could be interesting. It could mean nothing. We've got to find out. The detective's professional curiosity is piqued, knowing that domestic disputes, when left to fester, can tragically erupt into violence. So, JR's estranged wife, Taish Rue, became a person of considerable interest to investigator Maurice. Motivations often spring from deep emotional wells. Love, hatred, jealousy, revenge. Taish Rue, unhappy and recently estranged, represented a potential wellspring of such motives. This impediment, though frustrating, is not uncommon, especially if a person of interest is intentionally avoiding contact or has moved without updating information. Maurice, demonstrating practical investigative acumen, decided to circle back to Taish Rue later. Maurice decides to return to Taish Rue later and move on to JR's phone records. This strategic pivot is wise. Exhaustive pursuit of one led, while others might be more immediately accessible. can cause valuable time to be lost. Phone records, in contrast, offer an objective, immutable timeline of a person's digital footprint. We got any kind of phone records that we can get, Maurice affirms, highlighting the exhaustive nature of such requests. In the modern age, cellular data provides an almost forensic roadmap of a person's movements and communications, far more revealing than anecdotal accounts. Analyzing JR's phone records for the critical period, specifically the night of his disappearance, yielded immediate results. The evening of February 25th, he did have 2 phone calls from a man named Samuel Pillman. This discovery immediately placed Pillman in JR's last known interactions. Who could be the last person to see JR? This single piece of information, a phone call establishing a potential meeting, made Samuel Pillman a person of high interest. So Maurice wants to talk to this guy. This required a secondary search for his whereabouts. His boss tells him he lives at the Quality Inn. The detail, seemingly minor, provided a precise location. Upon arrival, Maurice followed standard protocol, approaching Pillman's room. He knocks on the door. No one answers. This could simply mean Pillman was out, or it could be a deliberate avoidance. Now, this reaction, swift and decisive, sends a clear signal to any seasoned detective. Now that raises an eyebrow. Indeed, innocent individuals, when contacted by law enforcement about a missing person, rarely react with such immediate and complete severance of communication. This is the subtle art of unintended self-incrimination, where actions speak louder than any words or silence. Hanging up on a detective ensures that you're about to meet the detective. This gentle satire, targeting the criminal's poor judgment, underscores the irony of attempting to evade law enforcement through such a transparent maneuver. The cat and mouse game has begun, but one side holds all the strategic advantages. Well, let's review Mr. Pillman. What do you have to do with the death of John? The unspoken question hangs heavy in the air, transforming Pillman from a person of interest into a focus of immediate suspicion. This adaptability is a hallmark of effective investigative work. Instead of merely identifying himself, Maurice immediately framed the conversation around the core issue. He says, "Look, I'm investigating the death of Leon Harrison Jr., and that's the only reason I want to talk to you." This directness, coupled with a specific mention of JR's death, cut through any ambiguity or pretense. Pillman, under this more focused pressure, decided to talk. His explanation delved into the world of illicit substances, revealing a different facet of JR's life that had not been mentioned by Brittany Green. "Mr. Pillman, why were you calling him?" Maurice inquired. Pillman's answer was direct. He said they were going to meet up. He was going to buy some drugs from Leon Harrison Jr. He further elaborated on the context of this planned transaction. "Well, my roommate and I wanted to celebrate a birthday, and so we thought we'd get a little high and JR could help us out." This detail, while painting a less than perfect picture of the victim, did not diminish the gravity of his murder for Maurice. "It didn't really matter to me. It didn't matter regardless of what his situation was. He was still murdered, and it didn't really matter whether he was a drug dealer or not. This reflects a fundamental tenet of justice. A life lost, regardless of personal choices or circumstances, demands accountability." Pillman's story continued, providing a chronological account of the events of February 20. Then he never shows up. When JR failed to appear, Pillman initiated a second call, so he called him back. Only this time, there's no answer. This raised another critical question for Maurice. Is Pillman lying? Did JR show up at the Quality Inn, and Pillman overcame him, robbed him of his drugs and his money, and then killed him? These are the immediate, harsh realities a detective must consider when a potential witness offers a story that could also conceal guilt. Fortunately, modern investigative tools offered a means of corroboration or refutation. We were looking at his phone, so we got to analyze the data. Crocs referencing Pillman's account with the objective record of the phone company provided the necessary validation. His conversation jives with the phone records because the second call Pillman made only lasted like 15-20 seconds because there's no answer. Like he said, the brevity of the call confirmed Pillman's story of an unanswered attempt. The phone records objectively supported his version of events, dissolving the immediate suspicion. So Pillman is dropped as a suspect. The investigation into JR's homicide was facing formidable hurdles. Everything was a challenge. I mean, because at this point we're already 2 weeks behind anyway, because he'd already been gone for 2 weeks. Time, in a murder investigation, is a relentless enemy, with each passing hour eroding evidence and allowing perpetrators to consolidate their lies. Being 2 weeks adrift meant crucial initial evidence at a potential crime scene would likely be degraded or entirely gone. Despite these significant setbacks, investigator Maurice was unwavering in his commitment. But I'm going to make sure I do everything I'm supposed to do. This personal vow underscores the tenacity required for such demanding work. His method was clear. That's gathering evidence, talking to everybody I can. I have to keep moving. Stagnation is death to an investigation. Constant motion, constant inquiry, and constant reevaluation are the lifeblood of solving crime. With Pillman cleared, Maurice returned to an earlier lead, the one that held the most emotional and psychological weight. JR's estranged wife, Taish. So he returns to the effort to find Taish Rue, the estranged wife of the victim, to see what she can say about his life. His persistence, a quiet, unglamorous aspect of police work, finally paid off. This time, Morris's luck changes and finally he finds Taish Rue. The breakthrough, like many in detective work, came from diligent tracking and inquiries. At the time she was working at steel mill as a security guard. This detail provided a concrete location for the interview. So we went over there and we spoke to her about Mr. Leon Harrison Jr. The initial interaction at her workplace was necessarily brief, setting the stage for a more formal discussion. They break the news to Taish Rue that her husband is in fact deceased. This moment is always fraught with emotional tension, an acid test of a person's authenticity. How one reacts to the death of a spouse, even an estranged one, often provides an immediate behavioral baseline for investigators. We spoke to her very briefly at the steel mill, and we got her to come to the police department. The shift to the police department for a formal interview signifies the seriousness of the situation. This meant their professional lives had intersected, adding another layer to their marital history. The interrogation began by probing into the lesser-known aspects of JR's life, including the drug-dealing activity uncovered during the Pillman interview. They asked her about his narcotic sales, and she immediately says, "Oh, that was a very minor, very occasional thing." This response, downplaying a known illicit activity, might be interpreted in various ways, an attempt to protect JR's image, to minimize its significance, or, perhaps, to deflect suspicion from its implications. Then, the focus shifted to the crux of their relationship, their marriage, and then they asked Taish to explain about their marriage. Her initial account, however, was somewhat sanitized, painting an evolving picture that changed as the conversation progressed. At first she made it seem like everything was good, and then it wasn't so great. "I don't know what she was on with his money. They met a few years ago. They got married, but money was always a problem. Financial strain, a common stressor in relationships, can exacerbate existing tensions and create new ones. This led them to a difficult living arrangement, so they became forced to move in with her father and her brother as a married couple. Such close quarters with in-laws can amplify interpersonal friction and dissolve any remaining marital intimacy." Further probing uncovered deeper, more painful truths about the marriage's demise. She had told us they both had issues with infidelity. This revelation indicated a mutual breakdown of trust and commitment. To understand what she was doing, what she wanted to do, and he was doing what he wanted to do. She discovered this, and she kicked him out. Despite the official separation, their relationship continued in a volatile, indeterminate state. But they had this on-again, off-again relationship for the last few months. This kind of unresolved emotional turmoil is a common precursor to domestic violence, and tragically, sometimes to homicide. The next question, simple in its phrasing, was monumental in its implication. They asked her, "When's the last time you saw your husband?" Taish's answer placed her directly in the timeline of JR's disappearance. She said February. She said he came by around 10 o'clock in the evening to pick up some of his clothes. This mundane errand, picking up belongings, becomes chillingly significant in hindsight. Her description of his last known activity further intensified the dramatic moment. "The last time I saw him, he was standing himself in his phone. He was phoned by the phone." JR caught up in a conversation, seemingly oblivious to the fate that might be awaiting him. Then, a new character entered the unfolding drama. She then says he was on the phone with the other woman that she identifies as Rosario. And according to Taish, this call was far from cordial. This portrayal painted Rosario as a volatile presence. We have Taish saying that Rosario is a maniacal, crazy woman who's insanely jealous of her. The psychological seed was planted. If Rosario was out of control, angry and jealous, what are you capable of? Just about anything, including murder. Taish, in this moment, effectively redirected suspicion, constructing a plausible narrative of a jilted lover consumed by rage. The detectives listened, understanding that in these situations, initial narratives are often carefully constructed, serving either to deflect or to truly inform. Meanwhile, the ripples of JR's death extended beyond the interrogation rooms, touching the innocent lives of his children. The initial shock, the natural human resistance to unthinkable tragedy, gave way to a dawning, crushing reality. Everybody around me was crying. The collective grief, a shared wound, created a surreal, disorienting experience. It was like an out-of-body experience, basically. In such moments, the comfort of routine and the stability of known truths vanish, replaced by an unsettling void. Yet, even in this profound sorrow, a glimmer of faith in the system remained. But we just gotta sit here and let the police do their job. It's a powerful testament to the community's trust in law enforcement, a silent plea for justice that weighs heavily on every investigator's shoulders. Investigators have learned about an enormously out-of-control argument between the victim and his girlfriend. This immediately shifted the investigative lens, creating a new, compelling avenue of inquiry. So Maurice is now extremely interested in Rosario. The possibility of a lover's quarrel, fueled by jealousy and ending in violence, is a well-worn path in criminal psychology. As if by some narrative serendipity, the answer to Maurice's growing interest literally walked through the front door of the police station. When somebody at the front desk says, "There's a woman here named Rosario who wants to talk to you," this unexpected arrival spared the investigators the search for Rosario, but raised new questions. She kind of gave us the insight of what their relationship was. They were in some kind of romantic relationship. She proceeded to tell them how she loved him desperately, and she's found out through other means that he's now dead. However, a critical omission in Rosario's actions prompted an immediate challenge from the investigators, probing her sincerity and involvement. "Why did you not report him missing? Why did you not come forward before you say, 'Hey, something's wrong'?" Her answers were framed within the complex, messy reality of an illicit relationship. "I don't know what to report for that. Well, for one, because he's still there, and I didn't want to interfere in that." Her hesitation, her fear of interfering with JR's existing marriage, speaks to the constrained circumstances of an extramarital affair. And on Earth, I thought it was just maybe he was embarrassed or trying to let it die down, because he knows his wife is black, or around, you know. The detectives then directly addressed the central point of contention raised by Taish. So they asked Rosario, "Do you know Taish?" Her response provided a counter-narrative, painting Taish, not herself, as the source of marital discord. "This is not a critical relationship from my understanding." Rosario went on to reveal details that sharply contrasted with Taish's account. She cheated first. She cheated multiple times. This reversed the infidelity blame. She used to try to go back and fix it. And any time he goes back, he'll try to fix it. Another guy will shoot the food. This vivid, if slightly crude, expression indicated a pattern of Taish engaging in serial infidelity, even after attempts at reconciliation. Rosario told us they had a marriage that may not have been going so well. Now, the investigators were faced with two diametrically opposed narratives, each designed to cast blame upon the other. Taish was saying that this other woman was the source of the rage and the potential threat. To JR, now the other woman is telling a totally opposite tale from Tia. The psychological analysis of these competing narratives points to an undeniable truth. One of these two is lying. Which one is? Either or both. Determining who is fabricating or obfuscating is paramount to peeling back the layers of deception. Rosario was asked about her own last interaction with Jeff. They asked Rosario when's the last time she saw Jeff. Her timeline was specific. She said February 3:30 in the afternoon. She picks him up from work. This established her final direct contact with him. And later that evening, apparently JR made his way to the home of his estranged wife. This places JR, with Taish, at the precise window of his disappearance. The crucial confrontation arrived when they presented Rosario with Taisha's claim of an angry phone call. So they confront Rosario about the angry phone call that supposedly was made by her to JR the night of the Rosario vehemently denied it, turning the accusation back on Tia. She said, "I've never had an angry phone call with JR. However, I got one from Tisha." Her account of the call shifted the aggressor's identity. "He was over there. He phoned me, and it was from his phone. So I answered. This had been after 10, right now, and it was the right and all I said was, hello. And she started talking, getting all over here. I fed up, jumped out. Seemed like I was smart. Is this the first time you were caught this morning? And I hung up the phone, and then she called back and said, 5 minutes after that. And I gave the answer. I'm assuming that's when she got the first voice there. This painted Taish is actively pursuing Rosario, filled with a furious possessiveness. This suggests Taish's rage had a focal point, the relationship between JR and Rosario. Critically, Rosario offered more than just her word. She hands her phone over to the detectives. They review her text, history, and calls. This move, transparent and confident, provided the objective verification that Taish's story lacked. This exactly confirms her story. The digital evidence corroborated Rosario's account, detailing the timing and brevity of the calls and the context of the messages. Rosario is not a killer. She's just a heartbroken woman who lost her boyfriend. This revelation was a crucial pivot point. Now, Maurice understands Taish is the jealous rage factor, not Rosario. The complex web of romantic entanglement was starting to clarify, shifting the spotlight squarely back onto Taish and her volatile emotions. With Rosario's alibi and counter-narrative corroborated by her phone records, investigator Maurice's focus returned with heightened intensity to Taish Rue, the estranged wife. The psychological portrait emerging of Taish was one of a jealous, perhaps manipulative, individual capable of fabricating stories to deflect suspicion. But the canvas of familial drama was still expanding. During the interviews, details emerged about the involvement and sentiment of Taish's immediate family towards JR. I've seen talked about a specific incident in anybody else. Like a homeboy, the wife's brother, Oli. They don't get along, because he's always put in the mix of their issues and their marriage. Immediately amplified the pool of potential actors. The animosity wasn't confined to the brother. She also goes on to say that Tishi's father, Alex Ra, Sr., hates J. A father's protectiveness, if coupled with deep resentment, can become a formidable and dangerous force. And her brother, Alex Ra Jr., also hates JR because JR is a bad influence on his sister, and Alex Jr. sees himself as his sister's bodyguard. This familial narrative paints JR as an unwanted, disruptive presence in the Rue household, a source of constant discord and perceived moral compromise. The confluence of a volatile wife, a protective, disapproving father, and an aggressively interventionist brother created a potent and potentially lethal dynamic. Now, we've eliminated Rosario, so we're left with Taish and her family. The investigative landscape had cleared, but the path forward was by no means simple. Maurice is buried up to his neck. Any emotion, lies, finger-pointing, an extremely complicated web. The metaphor is apt. He was deep in a tangled knot of interpersonal conflict, suspicion, and likely deliberate obfuscation. I lost a lot of sleep trying to figure it out, and just making sure that you cover every aspect of it. This is the unsung labor of detective work, the countless hours of mental wrestling, replaying scenarios, scrutinizing details, all while battling the relentless pressure to deliver justice. Despite the psychological complexity, Morris clung to the single, unambiguous piece of physical evidence recovered from the outset, the binding. But he knows he has one thing that is the only physical evidence recovered, is the wire used to bind the victim. This material link, though seemingly simple, held immense potential. That could be the answer to this, because where did that come from? Identifying the origin of the speaker wire could provide a tangible connection to the perpetrator, or at least to a specific location or source. But we believe that it could have been speaker wire. This initial assessment, based on its appearance, guided the next steps. Maurice initiated a methodical search for the source, and a lot of places in Georgetown that sells speaker wire. So I went to Walmart looking to see if there was any kind of wiring that looked like that wiring. The idea was logical. The idea would have been that they bought it from there. We could have maybe pulled surveillance footage and seen if we could see them buying it. He leveraged local knowledge, contacting store employees. They contacted people that work in those departments, and they strike up. Nobody's bought any recently. Nobody sells the kind that they have in their hand. This specific search, while yielding no immediate results, was not without its investigative value. It narrowed down the possibilities and confirmed the difficulty in tracing such a common item. Then, a detail about Alex Rue Jr. resurfaced, a seemingly innocuous fact that triggered a new direction. So Maurice decides to go see Alex Rod Jr. He works at a garage. The nature of Alex Jr.'s profession sparked a critical thought. We had got some information that he had worked on cards, and he may have done some audio stuff in the past. This was the bell going off in Maurice's brain, and a bell goes off in Maurice's brain. He works with speaker wire, the very thing that JR is tied up with. This specific, occupational connection offered a tangible, direct link between a suspect and the murder weapon, albeit an unconventional one. We were not able to locate anything that connected the wire that Mr. Leon Harrison, Jr. was bound with. Could have practically came from anywhere. The generic nature of speaker wire, frustratingly common, meant that this avenue, for now, had reached a dead end in terms of definitive identification. Maurice understood a grim reality. So Maurice understands he has no crime scene of occurrence. They had only a crime scene of discovery, a body found floating far downstream. They have a crime scene of discovery floating down the Black River toward the Atlantic. The absence of an originating crime scene added a profound layer of difficulty to establishing a chain of events. However, based on the accumulated information, JR's last known location with the marital discord, the family's animosity, a logical deduction emerged. Armed with his growing body of circumstantial evidence and a compelling hypothesis, the investigators had enough to take the next critical step. We had developed enough probable cause, circumstantial evidence to get a search warrant for the house. This physical proximity, their unified front, suggested a collective involvement, or at least a shared desire to resist the authorities. Give them a search warrant, and then they have to come out of the house while we are conducting a search of the house. It's a deliberate maneuver, isolating the potential suspects from the evidence as the meticulous process begins. The amateurish attempt at concealment screamed louder than any direct confession. A terrible press go. This attempt to hide, rather than truly erase, the evidence often seals a perpetrator's fate. Now, why would you do that? The question, rhetorical in its power, pointed directly to culpability. They knew they had found something. They pull up that insert of carpet. What lay beneath was the chilling confirmation of their hypothesis. The sheer saturation told a gruesome story. It looked like there was an attempt to clean up the blood. This was the frantic, amateurish attempt at concealment that often fails under forensic scrutiny. We spent hours in that room. Every inch of the scene was meticulously processed. Knowing the significance of every drop, we found several locations of blood. High-velocity spatter patterns are typically created by significant blunt force trauma, such as a beating or gunshot, indicative of extreme force. And so we processed the house, collected forensic evidence, and sent it off to the lab. There's an enormous amount of blood. The sheer volume of blood was the silent witness, testifying to a brutal, prolonged assault. Then, Morris brought a key piece of previous evidence into sharper focus. We have binding of a male victim. The presence of the binding, coupled with the extent of the blood, suggested a level of control and force that was unlikely to be wielded by a single person. This is not something that any reasonable person would believe was done by one person, but two people can do that, rather is. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, pointing to a conspiratorial effort. The detectives, however, had only circumstantial evidence, albeit powerful, and direct physical evidence, but not yet a confession or witness testimony directly linking individuals to the act. There is blood in that house. They have circumstantial evidence only, and it's insufficient to proceed to an arrest. This highlights the strict legal thresholds for arrest and prosecution. Suspicion, even strong suspicion, must be backed by probable cause that can stand up in court. To truly convey the extent, he used a visual aid. I showed her a picture of the subfloor with the saturation on the subfloor of blood. He then used a common human experience to frame the magnitude of the blood loss. This is so mean. This is how big your blood is. That's your little blood. Then, a sharp, challenging question. This has anything to do with him being hurt now. I do not. Do you know any time he bled that much? Is that a nosebleed? Taish, desperate to cling to her denial, offered an almost absurd explanation. She claimed it was a nosebleed. Morris's professional experience, coupled with the sheer volume of the blood, immediately recognized this as a transparent fabrication. This gentle satire, targeting the obvious weakness of her lie, underscored the futility of her attempt. Her further response confirmed her desperate evasion. I have no idea why. This is where this came from. That is a big injury. That's a life-threatening injury, I think. She still clung to a degree of plausible deniability, expressing a feigned innocence. I will never hurt my husband, and I miss him. It's the bottom of my heart. Can you physically overcome? Can you bind him with speaker wire? Can you assault him to the point of death? Can you pick up and remove a dead body and throw it in a river? Not by yourself. You can't. This highlights the critical inference of multiple actors. The binding, the violent assault, and the disposal of a body of JR's size all strongly suggest the involvement of at least two, if not more, individuals. She needs help, and the prime suspects for that help were her father and brother. The family that kills together stays together. This dark twist on a common idiom underscores the chilling potential of familial collusion in crime. We didn't feel like we were getting honest answers from her. This was not surprising. Given the evidence, that's good, because you're going to need one. The statement carries an ominous tone, indicating that the investigative team was confident they would ultimately secure the truth. As is her legal right, Tayish then invoked her right to counsel. Once she said she wanted a lawyer, she was free to go at that point. This marked another frustrating, yet procedurally correct, pause in the direct interrogation. This investigation has not yet produced probable cause to arrest anybody. Despite the compelling evidence, the legal standard for arrest, particularly when individuals invoke their rights, is high. Knowing and proving are two different things. This is the eternal struggle of legal systems, the profound chasm between intuitive understanding of guilt and the rigorous demands of evidentiary proof beyond a reasonable doubt. For now, it seems unclear who committed what parts of this vicious crime. The family unit had remained uncracked, their conspiracy holding strong, at least for the moment. At that point, we just have to, like I said, just continue looking for evidence. We want to know everything that happened. We want to know why you're following the evidence. Maurice's unwavering commitment to the process, following the factual trail wherever it led, was their only path forward. During this entire case thus far, Maurice had amassed significant circumstantial and forensic evidence, yet he still lacked the direct evidence that could stand alone to secure a conviction in court. Maurice has nothing you can explain to a jury or a judge that provides an direct chain of events leading to a specific individual's culpability, beyond a reasonable doubt for the actual murder. This is the precise moment when seemingly tangential events, often provided by unexpected sources, become the linchpin of a faltering investigation. However, they are fortunate that a fellow named Andrew Johnson comes forward. A new witness, unburdened by the family's conspiracy, was about to shed light on their post-homicide activities. Okay, Mr. Johnson, what do you know about this? Andrew Johnson's testimony was focused on events that occurred after JR's disappearance. Andrew Johnson says that after Mr. Harrison had been missing for a couple of weeks, he asked Alex Rue Jr. to drive to Myrtle Beach to help a friend move some furniture. Yup, I'm not the female in that soft photo of this. What we said. He was laughing. I'm like, man, you could do business. This remark, perhaps a light-hearted jab about Alex Jr.'s reaction to his sister's marital issues, takes on a darker tone in hindsight, hinting at a callousness or emotional detachment in Alex Jr., especially given JR's disappearance. They do a GPS location check on Alex Rue Jr.'s cell phone, and it shows that ride taking place to Myrtle Beach on the day when Johnson said it was. This pinpoint confirmation provided powerful validation, so it confirms the fact that that trip did occur. Johnson's story, therefore, gained immense credibility, transforming him into a reliable witness. And Johnson says that that's what Rue told him during that conversation. But the analysis of Alex Rue Jr.'s cell phone data yielded another, far more damning piece of information. And during that GPS search of Alex Rue Jr.'s cell phone, they also determined that 2 o'clock in the morning, he went to the local Walmart, the 26th of February. The 26th of February, the day immediately following JR's last known contact with T. The proximity in time was too striking to be coincidental. That's one of the only things at that time that was over. The cell tower data offered the timestamp and location, but not the specific purpose of the visit. We had to look at that video to see if they may have come in Walmart. The tedious, but essential, work of reviewing surveillance footage began. We went through that. Walmart footage, that was a lot of footage we had to go through. Hour upon hour of grainy video, scanning for specific individuals at a specific time, requires immense patience, but the payoff was absolute, and we found them on camera. It wasn't just Alex Rue Jr. Ferguson peroxide, and next to him, hydrogen peroxide is a very effective cleaning agent, particularly when it comes to blood. The scene, captured on impersonal security cameras, showed Alex Rue Jr. and another figure buying a crucial cleaning chemical. You have Alex Rue Jr. in that surveillance tape buying hydrogen peroxide, but it is livable. And then, the identity of his companion emerged, the implications searingly clear. Alex Rue Sr., dear old dad. The presence of the father, Alex Rue Sr., at 2 o'clock in the morning, purchasing hydrogen peroxide with his son, hours after JR's suspected death in his daughter's bedroom, shattered any remaining semblance of innocence. The supposed smarter, older, more calm individual in most families. Not in this family. He's part of the cleanup effort. This observational satire cuts to the core of their moral failings. Now, are there innocent people buying things in Walmart at 2 o'clock in the morning? Sure there are, but not these individuals. Not under these circumstances. However, they're not buying hydrogen peroxide. They clean up a whole lot of blood in their sister's bedroom. The combination of forensic evidence, the timeline, the individuals, and the specific purchase was irrefutable. So that is the ultimate nail in the Rue coffin. This damning footage was the final, incontrovertible piece of the puzzle. We look at that video and get into the point of making arrest. The feeling for investigator Morris, a newcomer to the grim world of homicide, was profound. It was a good feeling that I was able to accomplish that. This isn't satisfaction in the suffering of others, but the deep-seated triumph of professional dedication, culminating in justice. That was the first step to me in justice. This first major arrest, after weeks of relentless effort, represented a pivotal victory in his nascent career as a homicide investigator. Homicide investigation is overwhelmingly filled with pressure. The weight of a life lost, the silent demands of the victim's family, the public's expectation of a resolution, all combine to create an immense burden. That's why, when you have somebody by the throat, it is absolutely you. The throat here refers to the legal leverage, the undeniable evidence that tightens the grasp of justice, bringing relief and vindication. Based on the overwhelming and accumulating evidence, both circumstantial and direct, investigators had constructed a clear narrative of what had transpired on the fateful night of February 2017, leading to the brutal death of Leon Harrison Jr. The narrative began with a marriage in severe disrepair. Tyson Jr. had a failing marriage with cheating on both sides. This is a profound psychological observation. Emotions, unchecked, can metastasize into lethal intent. She plotted her revenge. The word plotted suggests premeditation, a calculated shift from emotional response to deliberate action. Taish then initiated contact, drawing JR into her trap. Tice decided to text Jr. The content of these messages, tantalizing in their promise, served as a lure. There were some text messages back and forth in a conversation about a candlelight dinner in the bathtub. This imagery evokes intimacy and reconciliation, precisely what JR might have yearned for in their on-again off-again relationship. And that's what he was going over there for. JR was stepping into what he believed was an opportunity for repair, a chance at rekindling a fractured connection. When he entered the house, he invited him into her bedroom, which I'm sure JR thought was promising, thought he was going to have a reconciliation with Tice. This is the chilling, dramatic irony of the situation. JR's hopes were cruelly inverted into his final moments. JR had no idea he was walking into a trap designed to end his life. This phrase captures the essence of betrayal and cold-blooded intent. The long history of conflict between the couple reached its tragic crescendo that night. There had been, no doubt, a history of conflict between the two, and I feel like that all came to head that night in the house. The solitary nature of a one-on-one confrontation quickly gave way to overwhelming force. Mr. Harrison's wife's brother was there. He got involved. Alex Jr., fueled by his self-appointed role as bodyguard, joined the fray. JR had been attacked and subdued and overwhelmed by these people. The number of attackers and their combined force rendered JR helpless. The specific binding material, once an elusive clue, was now firmly contextualized. And wire was used to tie his hands and feet, making him helpless. The method of restraint speaks to a desire for complete control, ensuring JR could not fight back or escape. Their beating was part of the rage factor, resulting in JR's demise. The high-velocity blood spatter found in the bedroom unequivocally supported the theory of a severe, blunt force assault. The coroner was unable to determine what was the fatal blow, and there's certainly no evidence to say which of these persons delivered that fatal blow. This important nuance, common in group attacks, emphasizes shared culpability for the death, even if individual roles in the final act cannot be surgically precise. Following the murder, the concerted effort to erase their crime began. There was a concerted effort at that point to get rid of the body, to clean up the scene, and to do what they could to distance themselves from that situation. This speaks to the desperation and, perhaps, the shared terror that can follow a heinous act. Then they removed JR from the premises, take him to the Black River, and toss him out. The river, a symbol of life and natural beauty, became an accomplice to their wicked designs, a dumping ground for their victim. Believing that he's going to float down the river, wind up in the Atlantic Ocean, and never to be seen or heard from again. This demonstrates a belief in the power of the vast, unforgiving ocean to consume all evidence, a common miscalculation among those attempting to dispose of a body. We don't know exactly where they dumped him. So much time had went by. I don't know if we ever know. The river, in its silent, relentless flow, held on to that final secret. In the ensuing legal process, the evidence, presented by the diligent investigators, was laid before a jury, who carefully weighed each piece. The roles played by each family member became a crucial point of distinction. In court, the jury determined the father was only involved in the cleanup, and not with a homicide, so they charged him with obstruction of justice. In the end, the judge, after considering the profound loss and the calculated cruelty of the crime, pronounced the sentences. In the end, the judge sentenced Taish and her brother, Alex, to 37 years in prison, each, and sentenced the father to 8 years. The sentences, lengthy and severe, reflected the gravity of their actions, ensuring that justice would be served through incarceration. "You're all done," Investigator Maurice stated, a simple phrase encapsulating the closure and the end of the legal process. For those whose lives JR had touched, the verdict, while painful, brought a measure of peace. Brittany Green, the mother of his children, found solace in the resolution. "I cried when I heard the verdict, because I knew that we finally got justice." Her tears were not just for the past, but for the profound void left in their lives. JR, he was a hands-on father, hands-on with everything, and sometimes I just want to, pick up the phone, talk to him about his kids. The daily ritual, so violently interrupted, left a permanent ache. His children, particularly, felt his absence keenly. I haven't had a dad see the teenage years, so a lot of things that a teenager would need their dad to show them. I really didn't have that. The lost guidance, the unshared milestones, are a lingering consequence of murder. Yet, even amidst the sorrow, the joyous memories, like that of the football touchdown, remained vivid, a testament to the love that transcended death. But when I make a touchdown, he's right there beside me. They carry on his memory with tender traditions. Every year, we celebrate his birthday and things like that. We go release balloons where we found him at, or we'll go to his favorite restaurant. It's not easy, she admits, but I know he's still sweaty. A poignant expression of enduring connection and emotional presence. For investigator Alan Morris, this case, his very first homicide, imprinted itself deeply. This homicide case, that one always stick out of my mind, because it was my first one, and ultimately, we got justice for our family. The experience, while arduous, cemented his resolve and validated his chosen path. Homicide investigation is the ultimate test of the skill of the investigator, demanding not only intellect and perseverance, but also a profound capacity for empathy and unwavering ethical commitment. Good police work is, in essence, the answer to the human condition's darker impulses. Good police work is the answer to the human condition. It is a recognition that, while humanity harbors great capacity for good, it also harbors immense capacity for evil, and when that evil manifests as violence, the societal fabric demands a response. It won't prevent anything, but it certainly will punish those responsible. This is the fundamental purpose of law enforcement in criminal investigation, to bring accountability to the perpetrator and solace to the aggrieved. We are the consequences for your behavior. This statement encapsulates the profound and necessary role of investigators, to embody the impartial, relentless pursuit of consequences for those who would violate the sanctity of human life and social order. That's what we do. And with that resolve, the work continues, ever vigilant, ever determined. On the horizon, the call of another case, another puzzle to solve, always beckons, reminding us that the fight for justice is Next time on American Detective, dismemberment is an incredibly evil thing. Their arms and legs were scattered around. This perpetrator is intent on covering his tracks. But no one can be careful enough to stop a good detective. we're dealing with one sick individual. The commitment to illuminating the shadows of crime, no matter how dark or disturbing, remains absolute. A constant affirmation of humanity's triumph over evil, fueled by the unwavering spirit of American detectives. It is Saturday morning, the 11th day of March, in the year 2017. Within the serene embrace of Georgetown, the soft light of dawn is just beginning to caress the placid surface of the Black River, a waterway that for countless generations has mirrored the quiet rhythms of life in this historic coastal community. A local resident, a man who finds solace and joy in the simple, age-old pursuit of fishing, is engaged in his cherished hobby, casting his line into the river's cool depths, anticipating the gentle tug of a catch. The air is crisp, carrying the subtle scents of marshland and pine, a typical early spring morning in the low country. However, the peaceful tableau is about to be shattered. As the fisherman patiently watches his line, his gaze drifts across the water, catching an unusual certain anomaly amidst the familiar currents and debris. Something is floating, something that distinctly does not belong, something that, at first glance, seems utterly out of place, defying the natural order of the river. A prickle of unease begins to stir within him, an instinctual alarm that something is profoundly amiss. He squints, trying to reconcile the indistinct form with anything he might reasonably expect to encounter on such a morning, perhaps a discarded piece of lumber, or a bundle of debris caught in the tide. Yet, the longer he looks, the more specific and disturbing the outline becomes. A sickening realization dawns upon him, a chill that has nothing to do with the morning air. What he perceives is unmistakably a human form, adrift and lifeless on the water's surface. The fisherman's heart seizes in his chest, his practiced eyes, accustomed to the nuances of the river, now recognize the undeniable, horrific truth. This is a body floating in the Black River, an image that will forever be seared into his memory, disrupting the tranquility of his simple Saturday, and marking the beginning of a profound disturbance for the entire community. The alarm that gripped him was not merely one of shock, but a deep, primal revulsion at the desecration of life, particularly under such unsettling circumstances. This discovery initiates a chain of events that calls upon a very specific breed of individual. Throughout my career, I have dedicated myself to the painstaking, often heartbreaking, process of closing murder cases. Each one a testament to the darker facets of human nature and the resilience of the pursuit of justice. But I am certainly not alone in this solemn endeavor. When such a call for justice reverberates through a community, it summons those rare men and women who possess an unwavering resolve to confront the unthinkable, to unravel the most intricate puzzles, and to tirelessly pursue the truth behind the seemingly unsolvable. It takes a unique spirit, an almost indefatigable will, to corner a ruthless killer, to meticulously piece together shattered lives, and ultimately, to find the solace of justice for the deceased, for their grieving families, and for the peace of mind of an entire society. That, in its purest and most challenging form, is what it truly takes to be an American detective. The gravity of such a title, the inherent weight of responsibility it carries, is understood deeply by those who embody its essence. Rawlings, this is investigator Alan Moores, responding to the chilling discovery. The unique local nomenclature often sparks a curiosity for those from outside the jurisdiction. How is it that down here they call an investigator instead of a detective? The answer lies in the broad spectrum of duties that officers like myself undertake within this sheriff's office. I guess because we're general investigators. My portfolio of cases spans an incredibly wide and varied range, reflecting the diverse needs of our community. I worked everything from complex fraud cases, unraveling webs of deceit and financial manipulation, to property crimes such as meticulously tracking stolen goods and bringing perpetrators to account. My duties also extend to the more high-stakes situations of bank robberies, requiring swift and coordinated responses, pretty much anything and everything. The very nature of this profession means we might get a call out, and you just never know what the next moment might bring. It could commence as a normal day, beginning with routine administrative tasks or follow-up inquiries. But a normal day can turn to a busy day really quick, morphing into a whirlwind of critical events and urgent demands with startling speed. The unpredictability is, in many ways, an inherent characteristic of the job, a constant readiness for the unexpected. Really and truly, this job is life, a profound integration of personal identity and professional duty, where the line between the two often blurs. The demands are all-encompassing, but so too is the commitment to serving justice. The call that day was unlike many others. A body was actually discovered in the county jurisdiction. This crucial geographical detail meant that it fell squarely under the responsibility of the sheriff's office. And because of that, the sheriff's office responded for law enforcement to go out there. We received the notification about 1:30 that day, just after midday, altering the course of what had, up until that point, been a relatively quiet Saturday afternoon. Upon my arrival at the scene, the initial phase of recovery was already underway. Fellow law enforcement officers, along with emergency personnel, were in the arduous process of bringing the body to shore. The practical challenges of such an operation are often overlooked. Law enforcement officers had to actually physically grab hold of the individual by clothing and just ease him back to shore, carefully, respectfully, and methodically. This process requires a significant amount of coordination and physical effort, especially considering the inherent difficulties presented by the water's current and the condition of the body. The initial moments of the scene are critical for an investigator. Was this somebody that had perhaps fallen in the water or out of a boat? These are the immediate, almost instinctive questions that spring to mind. One simply doesn't know the circumstances surrounding such a discovery. There is an initial reluctance to immediately jump to the gravest conclusion, as accidental drownings or other non-criminal incidents can regrettably occur. However, the scene quickly stripped away any lingering doubts of an unfortunate accident. But when they brought him to shore, the grim truth began to unfold with terrifying clarity. It was immediately evident to me that he had not fallen in the water accidentally. The evidence was stark, chilling, and undeniable. His wrist and his ankles were bound with speaker wire. The meticulous, deliberate act of binding a human being leaves no room for conjecture. That to me was a clear indication that he had been the victim of homicide, an act of intentional malice, stripped of any possible innocent explanation. This singular detail, seemingly small, spoke volumes and fundamentally altered the trajectory of the entire investigation, transforming a tragic discovery into a full-scale murder inquiry. When your victim is found floating in the water, the investigative path immediately becomes riddled with immensely complex challenges. The aquatic environment, while deceptively tranquil, does terrible things to human body. The water acts as a cruel accelerator of decomposition, a powerful distorting force, rapidly obscuring critical forensic clues. The elements actively conspire against the quest for truth. This means that at first glance, they can't tell the cause of death simply by looking at the remains, because they're in such poor condition. The soft tissues, the external features crucial for initial assessment, are often severely compromised, sometimes beyond immediate recognition. Here in the American South, the environmental elements can be particularly tricky, even in months that might seem mild elsewhere. Even in February and March, the mild temperatures combined with the humidity and the biological activity within the water conspire to accelerate the degradation process. The water plays a factor, and the decomposition and the speed are significantly impacted by these regional characteristics. The face is unrecognizable, a profoundly unsettling detail that further complicates the vital step of positive identification, which is usually among the first priorities in any homicide investigation. At that pivotal point, positive identification was not made. Yet, a trained investigator's mind is a vast repository of ongoing information, constantly sifting through patterns and potential connections. But I was thinking back, a particular case already underway stirring in the periphery of my consciousness. Just because we had already been investigating a missing person, a scenario that had unfolded a mere 2 weeks prior began to align itself with this grim discovery. I remember Ms. Brittany Green came in to report a missing person. Her words echoed in my mind. She states, "His name is Leon Harrison, Jr., but everybody calls him Jr., a familial, affectionate moniker that humanized the stark missing person report, and he is the father of her 2 children. This detail immediately underscored the profound human impact of his disappearance, emphasizing his integral role in a family. They no longer live together, their relationship having transitioned from cohabiting partners to but he routinely calls her every night to speak to the children. This established pattern, a consistent thread of paternal care and communication, was a key piece of information. The unsettling anomaly. He hasn't called in 2 weeks. A guy that has family, that has loved ones, that has children, they're not just going to vanish off this earth without a trace. This statement encapsulates a fundamental human expectation. People with deep connections don't simply disappear without leaving a void or an explanation. Brittany, with an understandable mix of concern and alarm, had provided police with specific details about Mr. Harrison. She explained that he is 32 years old, a vital detail for age-based identification. He is an African-American male, providing a crucial demographic characteristic. But he also has a distinct, physical marker that could serve as an invaluable identifier. He has a rose tattooed on his inner right forearm. An identifying tattoo, a personal artistic declaration now transformed into a potential key for identification. Now, Maurice is wrestling with a profound question, a harrowing intellectual leap, trying to determine if this body that was found in the river, so disfigured and ravaged by the elements, is in fact his missing person. The possibility hung heavy in the air, a chilling link between a 2-week-old report and a horrifying present discovery. For investigator Maurice, this case held additional, profound significance. His typical caseload usually consisted of property crimes, the diligent and methodical unraveling of thefts and break. The meticulous nature of his work, while demanding, rarely thrust him into the visceral, deeply disturbing realm of homicide. If this is, in fact, a homicide, it will be his very first. The weight of this potential responsibility, the sheer magnitude of such an investigation, was palpable. A homicide case demands a different level of investigative rigor, a relentless pursuit of answers that transcends the usual demands of the job. The decision was swiftly made, a standard operating procedure in any unexplained death. The body was sent for autopsy, the critical next step in unmasking the truth behind this tragic discovery. And for investigator Maurice, this also represented a personal, professional Rubicon. It was my first autopsy. The memory of it, even years later, remains vivid, etched into the fabric of his experience. So, yeah, it was a nerve-wracking thing. The human body, in such a context, transforms from a vessel of life into a puzzle of biological information, and the process of dissecting it, however clinical, is inherently confronting. I recall my first autopsy very well. The sheer sensory overload, the unexpected realities of the process, create an indelible impression. After he had been to several hundred of them, you tend not to pay attention, a necessary desensitization that allows for professional detachment. But the first one is a shock, a profound and undeniable impact on an investigator's psyche. That had been the first time that I had actually seen him, because I wasn't there during a retreat. The encounter was direct, immediate, and inescapable. It was gruesome. The sight of a human body, already deteriorated, now undergoing scientific dissection, combined with the earlier discovery of the bindings, painted a truly horrifying picture. He was bounded by hand and foot. That detail alone, the sheer dehumanization of the act, underscored the barbarity of the crime. That's the most uncivilized way that I could ever see a person going out of this world. A visceral reaction that speaks to the innate human sense of dignity and the abhorrent violation of it. The medical examiner, a seasoned professional, well-versed in the silent language of the dead, began to deliver their initial findings to investigator Maurice. They explained that although they cannot definitively determine the exact cause of death, due to the extensive decomposition level, which was so great as to obscure typical forensic markers, they could nevertheless confidently rule it as a homicide. This crucial determination was based squarely on the physical evidence of the bindings. The deliberate, methodical act of restraining a person, in this case, by their wrists and ankles with speaker wire, removes any possibility of an accidental death. It speaks to a malicious intent, a purposeful act of subjugation and violence. Further examination revealed additional, albeit puzzling, details. The lacerations to the belly, visible despite the body's condition, were not deep. They were not enough to cause exsanguination, or, as it's commonly understood, bleeding to death. Nor were they sufficient to cause significant internal damage either. The medical examiner, with scientific caution, admitted it's hard to say what those were with the condition of the body, particularly due to the presence of animals and that sort of thing in the water. The river ecosystem is teeming with life, and various aquatic creatures, from scavengers to larger predators, can alter external features post-mortem, making it challenging to differentiate between injuries sustained pre-death and those acquired afterward. There are also alligators in this very river, adding another layer of environmental complexity and potential for post-mortem damage. However, typically, they prefer living things. Normally, they'd like a live target that they can kill and then eat. This behavioral pattern made it less likely that the lacerations were alligator-inflicted prior to death. The medical examiner, in an attempt to provide any plausible insight, offered an opinion that perhaps a beating was involved that caused the death through unforced trauma, meaning internal injuries from blunt force without external penetration. But even this remains speculative, a hypothesis rather than a certainty. He can't even really say that. He just doesn't know, a stark acknowledgement of the limitations imposed by the compromised state of the remains. When your victim has obviously been in the water for an extended period of time, the harsh reality for forensic investigation becomes clear. There is no way DNA trace is going to survive, or fingerprints survive. The delicate biological markers that are usually gold standard in identifying perpetrators, or even connecting a body to a location, are often completely obliterated by the water's corrosive action, the process of decomposition. So you're not going to find something that identifies somebody responsible for this through those typical means. This meant that the conventional avenues of forensic identification for a perpetrator were effectively closed off before the investigation had even truly begun. Despite these significant obstacles and the disheartening absence of typical forensic identification, the findings of the autopsy were not entirely useless. In fact, they yielded one major exception, a singular, critical piece of evidence that cut through the ambiguity: the presence of a rose tattoo on the right arm. This distinctive mark, precisely as described by Ms. Brittany Green, served as an irrefutable identifier. It was the definitive confirmation. This body was that of Leon Harrison Jr., also known as Jr. With this positive identification, the nature of the case profoundly shifted. The case of missing person is now an official declaration that formalizes the full-scale murder investigation and underscores its immense gravity. There's an expression in the intense high-stakes world of homicide investigation, a dark and humorous adage that speaks to the immediate and profound learning curve inherent in the job. You go from being a new guy to an old guy in about 30 minutes. This encapsulates the rapid maturation, the intense pressure, and the accelerated experience gained when confronted with the stark reality of murder. Morris, now officially a homicide investigator, felt the full weight of this transition. He's nervous. The natural anxiety of confronting the unknown, of stepping into such a profoundly challenging role. He's worried. The immense responsibility of finding justice, of solving a crime where the victim can no longer speak for himself, presses heavily on him. He's all the right things. These feelings, far from being weaknesses, are actually indicators of a conscientious, empathetic, and dedicated investigator, one who understands the gravity of the task at hand. Such emotional responses are often the fuel for relentless pursuit of truth. With the victim now identified, Maurice's first critical step was to gather a comprehensive understanding of Leon Harrison Jr.'s life. So he begins by inquiring about the victim, to build a narrative of who he was, to uncover potential motives or connections that might have led to his tragic end. Ms. Brittany Green was once again brought in, this time not merely as a missing person reporter, but as a crucial witness, a window into JR's life. He gave us some information about him and what he was like as a father. Her testimony was poignant, painting a picture of a man cherished and missed. Leon. He was a funny, outgoing person, a big personality. This immediately established JR's character as someone vibrant and memorable, loved to smile, tell jokes, a loving, caring father. These descriptors humanized him beyond the stark label of victim, highlighting his positive impact on those around him. The emotional resonance was deepened by the voice of his son, a stark reminder of the void left by his father's absence. My dad was goofy, funny, joyful, and active. Such a description conjures images of shared laughter, playful moments, and engaged parenting. We always used to watch Dallas Cowboys for a very good day. This seemingly small detail speaks volumes about shared passions, rituals, and the deep bond between father and son. A specific, cherished memory stood out. My first day playing football, and I remember running my first touchdown. The son's words painted a vivid, heartwarming scene of his father's boundless enthusiasm. He was running down the side like, "Oh, go!" The sound of encouragement, the sheer exuberance of a proud parent. He met me in an end zone. He was going crazy. This wasn't just a father. This was an active, invested, joyous participant in his children's lives. Brittany Green reiterated the consistent, dedicated nature of JR's paternal bond, saying he always was connected to those two kids, and he called them every night. This underscored the abnormality of his 2-week silence. He would always come and check on his children, solidifying the image of a committed parent. With this foundation of JR's character established, The investigators delved into the more challenging aspects of his personal life, probing for any potential fault lines or conflicts that might shed light on his murder. The investigators talked to Green, asking the critical questions. Are there any issues? Does he have any enemies? These queries are fundamental in casting a wide net for potential suspects. The only thing she says is that he has an estranged wife, and her name is Taisha Rue. This detail immediately flagged a significant relationship dynamic, a potential area of unresolved conflict. Taisha's own account of their relationship history emerged as a crucial point of interest. I learned that Taish, probably like July of 2015, I got married, I believe, September. She says he'd been married for a while, but they recently broke up, and he moved out. This established a timeline of a relatively new marriage that had experienced recent strain and separation. He used to call me and talk to me about things that was going on in the relationship. This indicates a period of ongoing communication, possibly even seeking counsel or comfort. Despite the separation, he wasn't happy. A blunt assessment that further highlighted the marital discord. So he suddenly appeared to have a dead man with recent marital troubles of some kind. The psychological relevance of such a situation cannot be overstated in a homicide investigation. Unresolved conflict, betrayal, or intense emotional distress within a failing marriage often provide a fertile ground for murderous intent. That could be interesting. A detective's understatement, acknowledging the potential significance. It could mean nothing. The seasoned investigator also knows to avoid confirmation bias, understanding that initial leads, while promising, can sometimes prove to be dead ends. We've got to find out, a commitment to systematic inquiry. Given this new, compelling information, JR's estranged wife, Taish Rue, became of great interest to Marie. Her perspective, her understanding of their relationship's unraveling, and her knowledge of JR's recent activities were deemed vital. However, they found some difficulty in locating her. In the early stages of an investigation, people can be elusive for a myriad of reasons. Some innocent, others less so. Maurice, with the methodical patience characteristic of his profession, decides to return to Taish Rue later, opting instead to pursue other, more readily available leads that could provide a chronological anchor to JR's last known movements. The next logical step was to scrutinize JR's phone records, a digital trail that often illuminates a victim's final hours. We got any kind of phone records that we can get, Maurice likely instructed. Knowing the power of telecommunication data in reconstructing timelines and identifying contacts. The digital footprint proved immediately illuminating. The evening of February 25, 2017, exactly 2 weeks prior to the discovery of his body, was flipped. He did have 2 phone calls from a man named Samuel Pillman. This was a critical discovery, as Pillman now stood out as potentially the last person to see JR alive, a witness of paramount importance, or perhaps something more. So Maurice, driven by the urgency of this lead, wants to talk to this guy, prioritizing an immediate interview. Tracking Samuel Pillman was the next objective. We did get his job, his place of employment providing a logical starting point for locating him. But he was not there that day, a minor setback. His boss, however, offered a more promising lead, disclosing his temporary residence. He lives at the Quality Inn. So Maurice, armed with this information, goes there, thinking he'll reach Pillman quickly and gain crucial insight into JR's final known movements. Upon arriving at the Quality Inn, Maurice approached the designated room and knocks on the door. No one answers. This creates a moment of uncertainty, but a detective is rarely deterred by initial silence. He then attempts to call Pillman's cell phone, a direct and efficient approach. To Maurice's professional satisfaction, Pillman answers the phone. The conversation, however, takes an immediate and suspicious turn. When Maurice says who he is, clearly identifying himself as law enforcement, Pillman promptly hangs up. Now that raises an eyebrow, an immediate red flag that sends a jolt through an investigator's trained intuition. Pillman has just, in a single, impulsive act, informed Maurice he's a potential suspect. This reaction, abrupt and evasive, is rarely indicative of innocence. Hanging up on a detective ensures that you're about to meet the detective in a far more formal, potentially confrontational setting, removing any chance of a casual, informal chat. The psychological dynamics shifted dramatically. Well, let's review Mr. Pillman, tinged with a degree of analytical cynicism. Now you get a phone call from a policeman and you don't want to talk to him. This pointed rhetorical question underlines the immediate implication of such behavior. What do you have to do with the death of JR? The unspoken assumption, however cautiously entertained, is now that Pillman has something to hide, a direct link to the deceased that he wishes to obscure. Maurice, understanding that a direct, accusatory approach might not yield cooperation, recalibrates his strategy. When Maurice calls him back, he takes a different approach, a testament to the tactical flexibility required in interviews. He adopts a more neutral, fact-finding demeanor. He says, "Look, I'm investigating the death of Leon Harrison Jr., a plain statement of fact devoid of accusation, and that's the only reason I want to talk to you." This offers Pillman an opportunity to explain his prior behavior without immediately being branded a murderer. "Mr. Pillman, why were you calling him?" The direct question invited an explanation for the calls recorded in JR's phone records. Pillman's response came quickly. He said they were going to meet up. The purpose of this meeting, however, proved surprising and immediately led to new insights into JR's peripheral activities. He was going to buy some drugs from Leon Harrison Jr. This revealed JR's engagement in illicit activities, a crucial detail that often complicates victim profiles, but can also provide motives. Pillman elaborated, offering context for the drug purchase. "Well, my roommate and I wanted to celebrate a birthday, and so we thought we'd get a little high and JR could help us out." This painted a picture of JR as a low-level, casual provider of narcotics. JR's got this side hustle. He sells a little bit of grass now and again. This information, while potentially unsettling, did not alter Morris's core professional conviction. It didn't really matter to me. It didn't matter regardless of what his situation was. The moral judgment of JR's secondary activities was irrelevant to the pursuit of justice. He was still murdered, and it didn't really matter whether he was a drug dealer or not. This is a fundamental tenet of law enforcement. Every victim, regardless of their background or choices, deserves justice. The focus remains squarely on the crime and its perpetrator. Pillman's narrative continued, detailing the sequence of events that night. So Pillman says also that the first call he made with JR said, "All right, I'll come by your room, and we'll make the deal there." This established a clear intent for a physical meeting. Then he never shows up, so he calls him back. Only this time, there's no answer. The second call's duration, or lack thereof, would be a critical point of corroboration. The obvious, immediate investigative question arises. Is Pillman lying? The detective's mind automatically races through alternative scenarios. Did JR show up at the Quality Inn? And Pillman overcame him, robbed him of his drugs and his money, and then killed him. This theory, a plausible scenario of a drug deal gone wrong, had to be swiftly investigated and either confirmed or disproven. Maurice turned to the cold, impartial data of technology for verification. We were looking at his phone, so we got to analyze the data, a comprehensive review of Pillman's phone records. His conversation jives with the phone records because the second call Pillman made only lasted like 20 seconds because there's no answer. Like he said, the objective data, perfectly corroborated Pillman's story, indicating that the second call was indeed brief, consistent with a failed attempt to connect. The phone records acted as a silent, unwavering witness, effectively dismantling the suspicion, so Pillman is dropped as a suspect eliminated, one less avenue to pursue, and the investigation pivots, continuing its relentless forward momentum. This methodical process of testing hypotheses against evidence is the bedrock of criminal investigation. The early stages of any murder inquiry are often a chaotic dance between leads and dead ends, and in this case, the significant time lapse added immense pressure. Everything was a challenge. I mean, because at this point we're already 2 weeks behind anyway. The discovery of the body 2 weeks after JR was last seen meant crucial early evidence might have been lost, the trail grown cold, witnesses' memories faded, because he'd already been gone for 2 weeks. This forced the investigators to operate at an accelerated pace, trying to catch up to a crime that had already been hidden for too long. But I'm going to make sure I do everything I'm supposed to do. This professional commitment underscores the moral imperative of the job. That's gathering evidence, meticulously collecting every shred of physical or digital information, talking to everybody I can, expanding the circle of inquiry to encompass anyone who might possess even the smallest fragment of information. I have to keep moving. The sheer volume of work, the urgency of the task, demands constant, unwavering progression, refusing to let the elapsed time defeat the investigation. With Pillman eliminated as a suspect, Morris circled back to the previously identified, compelling lead. Taya Shrew, the estranged wife of the victim. His unwavering determination led him to revisit the effort to find her, to see what she could say about JR's life and, crucially, about their tumultuous relationship. This time, Maurice's luck changes. Finally, he finds Taish Rue. Locating her became a significant breakthrough. At the time, she was working at steel mill as a security guard. This provided a concrete location for the interview, so we went over there and we spoke to her about Mr. Leon Harrison Jr. The moment of breaking the news to a spouse, even an estranged one, about the death of their husband is always a profoundly difficult, sensitive task. They break the news to Taish Rue that her husband is in fact deceased. Her reaction, however measured, would be critical for the investigators to observe. We spoke to her very briefly at the steel mill, understanding the limitations of such a public and professional setting. And we got her to come to the police department for a more formal and comprehensive interview. The police department setting allows for a controlled environment, conducive to detailed questioning and observation. The investigators delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding Taish and JR's lives. Taish works as a security guard at a steel mill in the area, the same locale where JR worked there also, indicating a shared professional environment and a potential source of interactions or conflict. The interview progressed to a delicate but necessary line of questioning. They asked her about his narcotics sales, the side hustle uncovered during Pillman's interview. She immediately says, "Oh, that was a very minor, very occasional thing," downplaying the extent of his involvement. Such minimization is a common psychological response, often attempting to control the narrative or protect an image, even of an estranged spouse. Then, the focus shifted to the core of their relationship. They asked Taish to explain about their marriage. At first, she made it seem like everything was good, a facade often erected when people are confronted with the scrutiny of authority, perhaps an attempt to project an image of normalcy or innocence. And then it wasn't so great. The truth, however, began to crack through the initial veneer, revealing the deeper fissures. The root cause of friction appeared to be a common marital stressor: money. I don't know what she was on with his money, implying a sense of financial irresponsibility or mismanagement on JR's part, from her perspective. They met a few years ago. They got married, but money was always a problem. This recurring issue, often a silent destroyer of relationships, seemed to have plagued their union from its early stages. The financial strain led to a difficult living arrangement, so they became forced to move in with her father and her brother as a married couple. Living under the same roof as extended family can add considerable pressure to a strained marriage, intensifying existing conflicts. Taish also confessed to a darker, more emotionally destructive aspect of their relationship. She had told us they both had issues with infidelity. This acknowledgement of mutual betrayal immediately introduced a potent ingredient for rage, jealousy, and revenge into the narrative. To understand what she was doing, what she wanted to do, and he was doing what he wanted to do. This phrasing suggested a mutual abandonment of fidelity, a free-for-all where both partners pursued their own desires outside the marital bounds, potentially leading to deep-seated resentment and bitterness. Taish further elaborated on the breakdown, confirming her belief that JR cheated on her. She discovered this, and in an act of understandable hurt and anger, she kicked him out. But, true to the convoluted nature of many estranged relationships, they had this on-again, off-again relationship for the last few months. A turbulent dance of separation and reconciliation that kept the emotional wounds fresh and unresolved. Then came the critical question, pinpointing the victim's last known movements. They asked her, "When's the last time you saw your husband?" Her answer was precise. She said February 25th, the very date flagged by JR's phone records. She said he came by around 10 o'clock in the evening to pick up some of his clothes, a seemingly mundane activity that could mask something far more sinister. Her memory of that final encounter was stark and somewhat detached. "The last time I saw him, he was standing himself in his phone." This portrayal of JR being absorbed in his device created a subtle but telling image. He was phoned. He was phoned by the phone. This peculiar phrasing drew attention to the phone itself, an object that would quickly become a central player in the narrative. Taish then escalated her account, introducing a third party into this already complicated equation. She then says he was on the phone with the other woman, whom she readily identifies as Rosario. The tension, according to Taish, was palpable, and they have a heated argument on the phone. Very heated. She described the perceived intensity, suggesting an almost explosive verbal exchange. She says she could hear her through his phone, a detail that amplified Rosario's presence and imputed her involvement in the perceived conflict. This testimony provided investigators with a vivid, if potentially skewed, narrative. We have Taish saying that Rosario is a maniacal, crazy woman who's insanely jealous of her. This dramatic characterization immediately painted Rosario as an emotionally unstable, potentially violent individual. And if you're out of control, angry and jealous, what are you capable of? This rhetorical question hangs heavy in the air, hinting at the potential for extreme actions, including murder. Tayshia's account skillfully pivoted blame, directing suspicion away from herself and squarely onto Rosario, weaving a narrative that suggested a jilted, furious rival. The investigators, however, understood the importance of cross-referencing all accounts, knowing that perceived truths can often be cleverly constructed fiction. Amidst these professional interrogations, the emotional impact of JR's death on his family remained profound and heart-wrenching. His son recounted the raw pain. When my dad passed, I didn't want it to be true, but I had to believe it. This gut-wrenching struggle between denial and acceptance is a universal experience of grief. Everybody around me was crying. It was like an out-of-body experience. Basically, a numb dissociation from the overwhelming reality. But we just gotta sit here and let the police do their job. This statement encapsulates the agonizing patience and trust that grieving families place in law enforcement, hoping for answers and justice. Back at the investigative headquarters, Tayshia's narrative had undeniably shifted the focus. Investigators had learned about an enormously out-of-control argument between the victim and his girlfriend, with Taish as the primary source for this portrayal. So Maurice is now extremely interested in Rosario, prioritizing an interview with her to ascertain the veracity of Tayshia's claims and to gather her perspective on the complex love triangle. The serendipitous nature of police work often brings unexpected turns, and in this case, the next development arrived almost immediately. When somebody at the front desk says, "There's a woman here named Rosario who wants to talk to you," it was as if fate had intervened, presenting the very person they sought without the need for extensive tracking. The interview with Rosario commenced. We did talk to Rosario. She kinda gave us the insight of what their relationship was. Her perspective was crucial to developing a more complete picture of JR's romantic life beyond Tayshia's narrative. She confirmed their involvement. They were in some kind of romantic relationship, acknowledging the intimacy between them. She proceeds to tell them how she loves him desperately, expressing a deep, profound affection for Joe, painting a picture of genuine attachment and grief. And she's found out through other means that he's now dead, acknowledging her awareness of the tragedy, yet simultaneously raising a critical question for investigators. The investigators, employing a standard but pointed line of inquiry, immediately questioned a significant omission on Rosario's part. Why did you not report him missing? Why did you not come forward before you say, "Hey, something's wrong"? These questions are designed to assess credibility and to understand a witness's behavior patterns in the context of a disappearance. Rosario's explanation offered insights into her understanding of JR's tumultuous marital situation. I don't know what to report for that. Well, for one, because he's still there, and I didn't want to interfere in that. The he she referred to was undoubtedly T, indicating her perception of JR's continued, if strained, connection to his wife. And on Earth, I thought it was just maybe he was embarrassed or trying to let it die down, because he knows his wife is black or all around, you know. This phrasing suggested Rosario believed JR was attempting to manage the volatile fallout of his marital infidelity, potentially explaining his silence and her reluctance to intercede, thinking it was a domestic issue rather than a matter for police. The questioning then moved to her knowledge of Taish, a pivotal connection between the two women, so they asked Rosario, "Do you know Taish?" Her answer unveiled an entirely different dynamic, a reversal of Tayshia's portrayal. "This is not a critical relationship from my understanding. She cheated first. She cheated multiple times. She used to try to go back and fix it. And any time he goes back, he'll try to fix it. Another guy will shoot the food." Rosario's account was damning, asserting that Taish was the primary instigator of infidelity and that JR was repeatedly trying to reconcile only to be by Tayshia's continued doubt. This narrative directly contradicted Tayshia's earlier claims, setting up a clear conflict of testimonies. Rosario told us they had a marriage that may not have been going so well, a milder assessment than Tayshia's, yet still affirming discord. Taish was saying that this other woman was the source of the rage and the potential threat to JR. This was the narrative Maurice had previously encountered. Now the other woman is telling a totally opposite tale from Tish. The stark dichotomy of their stories presented a classic investigative challenge. One of these two is lying. Which one is? Or, Could it be either or both? The possibilities had to be weighed carefully, demanding corroborating evidence beyond verbal accounts. The next crucial detail to ascertain was Rosario's last known contact with JR. When's the last time she saw JR? She also named February 25th, aligning with Taisha's timeline. However, her specific timing was earlier in the day, 3:30 in the afternoon. She picks him up from work, establishing a clear activity prior to his alleged visit to Taesh. And later that evening, apparently, JR made his way to the home of his estranged wife. This sequence seemed consistent, placing JR at Taisha's house later that night. The investigators then directly confronted Rosario about the specific incident Taish had highlighted. So they confront Rosario about the angry phone call that supposedly was made by her to JR the night of the Rosario's response was emphatic, delivering another direct contradiction. She said, "I've never had an angry phone call with JR." This immediately undermined Taisha's core accusation of Rosario's maniacal jealousy. However, Rosario continued, offering an alternative explanation for the heated argument. Taish described, "However, I got one from Taish." This was a significant revelation. Rosario's narrative shifted the focus from her being the aggressor to her being the recipient of an aggressive call. She explained, "He was over there. He phoned me, and it was from his phone. So I answered. This had been after 10, right now, and it was the right, and all I said was, hello." And she started talking. Getting all over here. I fed up, jumped out, seemed like I was smart. This visceral description painted Taish as the one in a jealous rage, not Rosario. Rosario clarified the content of the furious call. She said, "She called me ranting and raving and screaming at me about being the, quote, other woman, unquote. And it was horrible." Taisha's perceived infidelity and intense possessiveness appeared to be the source of her anger. Rosario concluded her account of the calls. "Is this the first time you were caught this morning?" And I hung up the phone. And then she called back and said, 5 minutes after that. And I gave the answer. I'm assuming that's when she got the first voice there. Taisha's cussing at her and threatening her. I guess she had learned about the relationship. And she was mad. If I knew that she didn't like to get my earphones, anything. This detailed, consistent account painted a vivid picture of Taisha's fury and Rosario's defensive reaction. To verify Rosario's claims, a crucial step in any investigation, the detectives asked for her phone. She hands her phone over to the detectives. This willingness to provide corroborating evidence often strengthens a witness's credibility. They review her text history and calls, the objective data proving indispensable. This exactly confirms her story. The phone records became the undeniable, impartial witness, validating Rosario's account of the incoming calls from JR's phone, the specific timings, and the absence of any aggressive outgoing calls from her to JR. The conclusion was now clear. Rosario is not a killer. She's just a heartbroken woman who lost her boyfriend. Her emotional responses and the irrefutable phone records pointed away from her culpability. Now, Maurice understands Tish is the jealous rage factor, not Rosario. The investigative pendulum swung decisively. Taisha's initial attempt to deflect blame onto Rosario had backfired spectacularly, now firmly placing the spotlight back on her and her intense, expressed anger. Rosario, during her extensive interview, offered another crucial piece of information, revealing broader familial discord within Taisha's household that might be relevant to JR's fate. She'd seen and talked about a specific incident in anybody else, like the wife's brother, Ali. They don't get along, because he's always put in the mix of their issues and their marriage. This introduced a new potential player, Taisha's brother, Alex Rue Jr., the dynamics of a sibling loyalty, particularly when one perceives their sister to be wronged, can escalate rapidly into physical confrontation. So, the boyfriend's brother is going to take his sister's time. This implies a protective, possibly aggressive, stance on Alex Jr.'s part. Rosario also went further, expanding on the family's overall sentiment towards JR. She also goes on to say that Taisha's father, Alex Rue, Sr., hates J. The animosity, it seemed, was not confined to the siblings but extended to the patriarch of the household. And her brother, Alex Rue, Jr., also hates JR, because JR is a bad influence on his sister. The reason for their antipathy, from their perspective, was JR's perceived negative influence. And Alex Jr. sees himself as his sister's bodyguard, an almost archetypal role of a fiercely protective brother, often willing to resort to physical intervention. This constellation of family hatred, protective instincts, and perceived wrongdoing created a far more menacing picture surrounding two. Now, with the systematic elimination of Rosario, Maurice's investigative nets tightened significantly. We've eliminated Rosario, so we're left with Taish and her family. The circle of suspicion had narrowed to a tightly knit, deeply interwoven group with known animosity towards the victim. Maurice is buried up to his neck. The complexities of this case were escalating rapidly. Any motion lies, finger-pointing, an extremely complicated web of contradictory narratives and mutual accusations. The emotional toll of navigating such intricate deceptions can be immense. I lost a lot of sleep trying to figure it out, and just making sure that you cover every aspect of it. This speaks to the investigator's relentless dedication. The sleepless nights spent meticulously reviewing every detail, every statement, ensuring no stone is left unturned. But he knows he has one thing that is the only physical evidence recovered, a singular, tangible thread connecting the crime to the world. Is the wire used to bind the victim? That could be the answer to this, because where did that come from? This tangible artifact became the focal point, the silent witness that could potentially betray its owners. The binding wire, so simple yet so crucial, was initially identified, but we believe that it could have been speaker wire. The specificity of the material would be key. With this hypothesis, Maurice initiated a targeted search for the origin of the binding material, and a lot of places in Georgetown that sell speaker wire, presenting a seemingly daunting task. So I went to Walmart, looking to see if there was any kind of wiring that looked like that wiring, starting with a major retail chain where such items are commonly sold. The idea would have been that they bought it from there. We could have maybe pulled surveillance footage and seen if we could see them buying it. This outlines a logical, systematic approach, leveraging sales records and surveillance. They contacted people that work in those departments, inquiring directly about recent sales or specific product types, and they strike up. Nobody's bought any recently. Nobody sells the kind that they have in their hand. This initial avenue, while thoroughly explored, yielded no immediate connections. The specific wire remained untraceable from major retailers. The context of his employment offered a new angle. We had got some information that he had worked on cars, and he may have done some audio stuff in the past, and a bell goes off in Maurice's brain. This piece of information, seemingly benign, triggered an intuitive connection in the investigator's mind. Alex Jr., single quotes, experience with audio installations immediately brought the speaker wire back into sharp focus. He works with speaker wire, the very specific type of material used to bind JR. This was a direct, compelling lead. Upon arriving at the garage, Maurice found Alex Jr. to be absent. He's not there. However, the manager was present. Maurice identified himself and immediately inquired, "Do you employ Alex Rue Jr.?" The manager's reply confirmed the employment and elucidated Alex Jr.'s specific role. "I do, but he only comes in a couple days a week. He installs radios in people's cars." This detail was critical, establishing a plausible context for Alex Jr. to have access to speaker wire. Maurice then posed the crucial question, "Do you have any of the wire here that he uses?" A sample of the wire used by Alex Jr. at the garage was provided to Maurice. It's examined and compared to the wire found around the victim, and the result was a letdown. And they're different. The investigative path reached another frustrating dead end. We were not able to locate anything that connected the wire that Mr. Leon Harrison, Jr. was bound with. The grim reality was that the specific type of speaker wire used could have practically came from anywhere, robbing them of a direct link to the perpetrators. Through this piece of physical evidence, Maurice, with growing frustration, now understood a fundamental challenge of this case. He has no crime scene of occurrence. The river, a crime scene of discovery floating down the Black River toward the Atlantic, offered no immediate clues as to where JR had met his end. The primary crime scene, where the murder itself transpired, remained elusive, yet vitally important. However, the psychological dynamics revealed through the interviews, the animosity within the Rue household, and the known movements of JR on his last night, strongly suggested a plausible location. The likely scenario is, he died in the Rue household. Something bad happened in that house. A strong hypothesis forming from the cumulative circumstantial evidence. The weight of accumulated suspicion against the Rue family, though circumstantial, reached a tipping point. We had developed enough probable cause, circumstantial evidence to get a search warrant for the house. A search warrant is a legal cornerstone, granting permission to delve deeply into private spaces to search for evidence of a crime. We went to her house on High Market Street, accompanied by a team of officers. The execution of a search warrant is a structured, often tense operation. Alex Jr. and Sr. are seated right next to Taish, their presence reinforcing the family unit under scrutiny. Officers explained the process, give them a search warrant, and then they have to come out of the house while we are conducting a search of the house. This ensures officer safety and prevents any tampering with evidence during the search. The meticulous search commenced. We're taking photographs, documenting every detail of the scene. We're searching rooms, methodically combing through the entire residence. We were looking for cutting objects, specifically sharp instruments that could have created the belly lacerations or severed the carpet. Speaker wire, in case any remnants of the specific binding material was still present. Any kind of other DNA, any biological material that could link individuals to the crime. The search team eventually made its way into Taishi's bedroom, a private space that often holds intimate secrets. The room was fitted with wall-to-wall carpeting. And then, a crucial visual anomaly, a disruption in the expected pattern. We noticed that there was missing pieces of carpet. A distinct area of carpet had been cut and replaced. The immediate deduction for a seasoned investigator is that something illicit had occurred there, necessitating such a clumsy. Driven by the suspicion, the investigators immediately acted. They pull up that insert of carpet, carefully peeling back the obvious concealment. What lay beneath proved to be a pivotal discovery. We removed the carpet padding, the layer directly under the carpet, and then under there on the subfloor, the foundational wooden layer beneath the padding. There was what appeared to be a stain of some sort. The visual evidence of a potential bodily fluid immediately escalated the tension in the room. We did a presumptive test, a rapid chemical analysis designed to indicate the presence of blood, and come back positive for blood. The presumptive test instantly confirmed their suspicions, sending a jolt of affirmation through the investigative team. Blood, the most compelling and frequently found forensic evidence at a violent crime scene. Blood is discovered in Taisha's bedroom, and it was not just a mere drop or a small splatter. There's so much blood. The quantity was significant, deeply indicative of severe trauma. It's not just the carpet pad that's soaked. The saturation extended beyond the immediate surface. It's the subfluorium, meaning the blood had permeated through multiple layers, indicating a profound loss of blood in that specific spot. It looked like there was an attempt to clean up the blood, evident from the amateurish patch job and potentially from residues of cleaning agents. We spent hours in that room, meticulously documenting and collecting every piece of evidence. We found several locations of blood, not confined to one isolated spot, suggesting movement, struggle, or multiple impacts. There was some high-velocity spatter on walls. This specific pattern of blood, characterized by fine, dispersed droplets, carries critical information about the nature of the violence. Blood spatter comes from blunt trauma, the force of an object striking flesh, or cast-off blood, often from a weapon being swung and shedding blood in a linear pattern from striking or beating someone, and probably an instrument or maybe fists. These patterns provided undeniable forensic proof of a violent assault. Something bad happened in that room. We know that. This was no longer just a theory. It was a forensic certainty. We could tell by that amount of blood. The sheer volume and distribution of the blood unequivocally indicated a life-threatening, violent event. And so we processed the house, collecting every piece of forensic evidence, sealing it, and carefully transporting it to the lab for detailed analysis. The next critical step was definitive confirmation, transforming presumptive findings into irrefutable scientific proof. They want to be absolutely certain this is JR's blood. The stakes were too high for any uncertainty. So they run a lab test, submitting the collected blood samples for DNA analysis. And they determine that is in fact a case, providing an unassailable scientific link between the victim and the crime scene. So JR meets his end in Taisha's bedroom. This conclusion was chilling, definitive, and profoundly disturbing. The physical evidence from the scene, combined with the earlier autopsy findings, began to paint a terrifying picture. There's an enormous amount of blood. The sheer quantity suggested a sustained, violent assault, far beyond what a minor nosebleed or superficial injury would cause. We have binding of a male victim. The methodical act of restraining JR. It was also immediately clear that this level of violence and disposal required more than a single perpetrator. This is not something that any reasonable person would believe was done by one person. The physical act of subduing, binding, assaulting, to the point of death. Then removing and disposing of a 32-year-old male body is an immense physical undertaking. But two people can do that rather easily. This shifted the focus towards group culpability, leading Maurice to revisit the concept that this was all a family affair. The combined animosity and opportunity made the Roux family the undeniable primary suspects. With this damning new evidence, Taish was once again summoned for questioning, this time under far more serious circumstances. Taish, we brought her in again to speak to us. The approach would be direct, confrontational, yet still within the bounds of legal procedure. There is blood in that house. This statement would cut through any previous pretense. Yet, for an arrest, the investigators needed more than just the presence of blood. They needed to solidify the link. They have circumstantial evidence only, and it's insufficient to proceed to an arrest without further strengthening their case. While extremely strong, a bloody subfloor and JR's identity were not yet enough for an immediate arrest warrant for murder, as the specific acts and participants remained to be definitively established in the eyes of the law. Maurice continued to press Taish, wielding the powerful visual evidence of the crime scene. Here's what we know. There were 100 bloods in the bedroom. This vivid phrasing emphasized the sheer, overwhelming amount. We don't talk about a speck of blood like that. We talk about the saturation. He was explicitly debunking any notion of a minor incident. I showed her a picture of the subfloor, with the saturation on the subfloor of blood. The image of the soaked subfloor, undeniable and visceral, was placed directly before her. This is so mean. This is how big your blood is. That's your little blood. This sarcastic, pointed comparison highlighted the absurdity of any attempt to minimize the event. Taish's defense, however, remained rooted in denial and a ludicrous attempt at explanation. This has anything to do with him being hurt now. I do not. Do you know any time he bled that much? Is that a nosebleed? No, that is a nosebleed. She brazenly claimed it was a nosebleed, a desperate and transparent lie that strained credulity. Maurice, cutting through the obvious deception, responded directly. You could have had a fire hose up your nose, and you wouldn't produce that much blood. This blunt, slightly satiric retort emphasized the physical impossibility of her explanation, exposing the absurdity of her attempt to mislead. Her response, I have no idea why. This is where this came from. That is a big injury. That's a life-threatening injury, I think. This statement, however, unwittingly acknowledged the severity of the blood loss and implied knowledge of its origins, despite her feigned ignorance. Her final declaration was an attempt to invoke sentiment and loyalty. I will never hurt my husband, and I miss him. It's the bottom of my heart. But the cold facts on the subfloor contradicted her emotional plea. Maurice countered, cutting through the pretense. She said that she would never hurt her husband. And then I said, well, somebody did. He was killed in that room. This left no room for doubt or evasion, stating the incontrovertible truth that the room had been the scene of murder. It was the days when you broke her in the house at night. It's an acknowledged's favorite. This cryptic reference, possibly an internal jargon or an observation related to the methods of criminal psychology in understanding victim behavior, seemed to underline the manipulative trap JR had walked into. The theory began to coalesce with chilling clarity. The physical impossibility of a single, smaller individual performing such a brutal act of murder and disposal on a 32-year-old male was evident. The theory is quite simple. Taish, can you physically overcome Can you bind him with speaker wire? Can you assault him to the point of death? Can you pick up and remove a dead body and throw it in a river? The answer was a resounding, implicit negative. Not by yourself. You can't. The physical demands of the crime necessitated assistance. She needs help. And the family dynamic, with the known hatred for JR, pointed directly to that source of help. The old adage took on a new, horrifying meaning. The family that kills together stays together. The idea was to isolate her, to show her that the walls of her denial were crumbling, but her resolve remained unbroken for the moment. We didn't feel like we were getting honest answers from her. That's good, because you're going to need one. A subtle threat hinting at the mounting evidence. Once she said she wanted a lawyer, she was free to go at that point, exercising her constitutional rights. For now, Taish Roux remained outwardly defiant. This investigation has not yet produced probable cause to arrest anybody for the murder. Knowing and proving are two different things, a stark reality in criminal justice. The investigators possessed a strong intuition and compelling circumstantial evidence. but they needed that decisive piece that would allow them to confidently proceed to an arrest and secure a conviction. For now, it seems unclear who committed what parts of this vicious crime. At that point, we just have to, like I said, just continue looking for evidence. We want to know everything that happened. We want to know why you're following the evidence. The meticulous, evidence-driven approach remained paramount. During this entire case thus far, Morris had encountered frustrating roadblocks in obtaining direct, undeniable evidence. He has nothing you can explain to a jury or a judge with absolute certainty in terms of a direct link to the perpetrators. However, in the unpredictable theater of criminal investigation, fortune sometimes smiles upon the diligent. They are fortunate that a fellow named Andrew Johnson comes forward. A walk-in witness, often unexpected, can sometimes prove to be the linchpin that turns a stagnant case into a torrent of new leads. Okay, Mr. Johnson, what do you know about this? Morris would have inquired, maintaining a calm, open demeanor to encourage full disclosure. Andrew Johnson proceeded to tell a significant story that tied directly into the Rue family. He says that after Mr. Harrison had been missing for a couple of weeks, he asked Alex Rue Jr. to drive to Myrtle Beach to help a friend move some furniture. This seemed like an innocuous request on the surface, a favor between friends, so Alex Jr. agreed, apparently undertaking the task. Now, Andrew Johnson feels it's important to come in and tell the police this. This indicated a strong sense of moral obligation, or perhaps a growing unease on Johnson's part about what he knew. The true significance, however, lay in an exchange that occurred during that drive. Yep, I'm not the female in that soft photo of this. What we said, you know, he was laughing. I'm like, man, you can do business. Johnson's phrasing, though somewhat colloquial, suggested a deeper meaning. Alex Jr. had confessed something during the drive, something incriminating, relating to what we said, implying a discussion of JR's murder. The laughing seemed to indicate a chilling lack of remorse, or perhaps a desperate attempt to appear casual. You can do business could refer to handling the body or the cup. The investigators immediately understood the profound potential of this overheard confession, however cryptic. Investigators, following protocol, needed to confirm Andrew Johnson's story, verifying every detail against objective data. We got phone records. These digital trails once again became crucial to corroborating verbal accounts. They give us analysis, and that's what we went off of. The raw data provided by cell phone companies can pinpoint locations and communication patterns. They do a GPS location check on Alex Rue Jr.'s cell phone. This allowed them to map his movements. And it shows